How to Train Your Dragon. Finding a Black Dragon Egg from Monster Hunter. Chapter 21. Watch closely, this is how you grill fish. Lin picked up a slender branch, skewered the remaining fresh fish from his embrace onto its tip, then slanted the branch into the soil beside the bonfire. The fish was half a foot from the flames, close enough to feel the heat but not directly scorch. Mira squatted beside him, her golden eyes fixed on the fish on the branch, even her breathing softened. Occasionally, she would gently touch the branch with her paw, as if confirming something. Before long, the surface of the fish gradually turned golden brown, oil dripped into the fire, sparking tiny embers, and the aroma filled the air. Mira's nose twitched, and she let out two urgent oohs at Lin, her small head leaning towards the branch. Lin immediately understood, smiling as he rubbed her ear. Want to try it yourself? Don't rush, I only brought these two fresh fish today, and you already burnt one. We need to save this one. He took out some roasted meat from his embrace and offered it to Mira. Eat this first to fill your belly. Tomorrow, I'll bring back more fresh fish, and we can slowly teach you how to grill them. I promise you'll get to eat fish that's crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, okay? Mira stared at the roasted meat, then at the branch by the bonfire, hesitated for a moment, then took the roasted meat. However, she didn't eat it immediately, instead rubbing her head against Lin's hand, as if nodding in agreement. Lin sat by the fire, watching Mira nibble at the roasted meat, his heart filled with warmth. After Mira finished eating and curled up at his feet to doze, he quietly got up and walked to the wooden bed in the corner of the wooden house, sitting down cross-legged. Following the method he had previously discovered, he closed his eyes, his fingertips gently resting on his knees, and began to try absorbing the surrounding ley line energy. Initially, there were only faint energy fluctuations in the air, slowly flowing into his body like a trickle. Lin held his breath and concentrated, guiding these energies to circulate along his meridians. With each passage, he could feel a faint warmth spreading through his body, and the fatigue from the day's training slowly dissipated. He knew that Burke Island's ley line energy was increasing day by day, especially at night, when the energy flow would be more pronounced than during the day. This was also why he chose to cultivate late at night. As more and more energy was absorbed, Lin suddenly felt the dragon taming power within him become restless, as if something outside his body was pulling it, and even the energy flow in his meridians accelerated. He subconsciously opened his eyes, only to find that Mira had woken up at some point and was quietly nestled by the bed, her small body almost touching his knee. Her golden pupils glowed with a gentle light, her small head tilted slightly, her gaze fixed intently on his body, as if she was intently watching the trajectory of the energy flow. Even more miraculously, a faint silver-red halo enveloped Mira's dark scales. The halo gently undulated with her breathing, astonishingly consistent with the fluctuation frequency of his dragon taming power. Even the rhythm of their pulsations was identical. Our energies are the same after merging. Lin's heart stirred. He tried to relax his mind and gently released a wisp of the dragon taming power from his body. As soon as that wisp of energy floated into the air, it seemed to come alive, drifting directly towards Mira, integrating into her body through the gaps in her scales without any obstruction. As soon as the energy entered Mira's body, Lin clearly perceived its trajectory as it moved within Mira. First, it flowed along her spine to her head, then circled her heart, and finally returned to her abdomen along her limbs. At the same time, the ley line energy around the wooden house suddenly accelerated its flow, and tiny threads of energy seeped in through the door and window cracks. They slowly converged around Mira, gradually forming a miniature energy vortex, with a blue halo gently swirling within the vortex, like the halo surrounding a star. After that wisp of dragon taming power circulated through Mira's body, it actually split into two wisps under the nourishment of the vortex energy. One wisp remained within Mira, continuing to circulate along her meridians. The other wisp, carrying a faint warmth, floated back to Lin's glabella and entered his body. Lin could clearly feel that this returned wisp of dragon taming power was much more condensed than before, like loose cotton turning into tight thread. As it circulated along his meridians, his perception also sharpened slightly. He could not only see the trajectory of the energy flow within his body but also vaguely sense the ley line energy outside the wooden house slowly flowing through the soil, like invisible streams converging towards the northwest. Mira also seemed very comfortable, emitting a faint, purring sound from her throat, her small tail gently sweeping the ground. The halo on her scales brightened further, and even her golden pupils were tinged with a light red, as if responding to the nourishment of the energy. Another hour passed, and Lin slowly concluded his cultivation. When he raised his hand, his fingertips still tingled with the faint numbness of energy flow. He subconsciously wiped his forehead, and his fingertips immediately collected a layer of fine sweat beads. The sweat dripping down his cheeks glistened under the faint glow of the bonfire. Whew! He let out a soft sigh, feeling a slight throbbing in his temples and even a heaviness in his eyelids. Although the energy resonance with Mira just now was smooth, it consumed several times more mental effort than cultivating alone, like simultaneously controlling two different energy flows, where a slight mistake could lead to chaos. But when he felt the dragon taming power within him, the fatigue was instantly replaced by surprise. That power was not just a little bit stronger than before, it became more condensed as it circulated, and his physique felt much lighter, clearly feeling the surging strength in his muscles when he raised his hand. If he were to fight the deadly Natter again during the day, he wouldn't be so disheveled with his current strength. This effect was several times greater than his usual solo cultivation. He looked down at Mira, who was sound asleep at his feet, still in her cuddling posture, her head gently resting on his pant leg. The halo on Mira's scales gradually faded, leaving only a faint sheen. Her small tail occasionally twitched gently, as if still chasing the shadows of energy in her dreams. Lin smiled and carefully lay down, trying not to wake Mira, his movements even lighter than usual. He knew that tonight's growth was inseparable from this little black dragon. Lin smiled and carefully lay down, trying his best not to wake Mira. The wind outside the window continued to blow, but Lin knew that after tonight's cultivation and energy resonance, the connection between him and Mira had deepened. They were no longer just partners, but more like symbiotes, sharing energy. After lying down, Lin didn't immediately fall asleep. He gazed at the wooden beams on the roof, and a thought suddenly popped into his mind. Since he and Mira could absorb ley line energy to grow stronger, could Hiccup, or even other Vikings, also do so? If so, Burke Island's ability to deal with dragon groups and unknown dangers would greatly improve. However, this idea still needed verification, as not everyone could possess dragon taming power and the ability to resonate with dragon's energy like him. His thoughts drifted to the next day. Lin remembered Hiccup's longing look for the night fury last night, so he would surely bring a large basket of fish to the cove to feed it tomorrow. He planned to follow Hiccup tomorrow to see. Not only could he see if the night fury also absorbed ley line energy, but he could also take the opportunity to observe Hiccup's bond with the night fury, and perhaps even test the ley line energy near the cove. Additionally, he would bring back an eel to see if Mira also disliked eels, as most dragons in How to Train Your Dragon strongly disliked them. The wind outside the window continued to blow. As Lin thought about these things, the corners of his mouth unconsciously turned up, and accompanied by Mira's steady breathing, he gradually drifted into dreamland. The sun hadn't risen yet, and Burke Island was still steeped in inky darkness, but a faint firelight already shone from the blacksmith's window. Hiccup gently pushed open the door, spread the parchment with Toothless's drawing on the anvil, and traced the missing part of the tailfin with his fingertip, his eyes exceptionally resolute. He picked up a charcoal pencil and repeatedly sketched in the blank space. Soon, the desktop was covered with tailfin drafts, some focusing on balance, others on flexibility, each stroke revealing his concern for the night fury. He turned and dragged out a pile of scrapped old weapons, tossing them into the roaring furnace. The flames licked the metal, burning it bright red and radiating a scorching glow. Hiccup put on thick gloves, abruptly clamped out the glowing red metal blank, and slammed it heavily onto the anvil. Clang! Clang! The dull pounding broke the silence, sending sparks flying. He repeatedly hammered and shaped the blank into a straight iron rod, then quickly plunged it into cold water. With a sizzle, white mist rose, and the iron rod instantly hardened. Picking up the iron rod and comparing it to the drawing, he then removed the nails from a shield, reheated them, and forged them into tiny parts. Finally, he spread out a thick piece of leather, precisely cut it with a dagger, quickly forming the exact shape of the tailfin drawing, then firmly secured the parts to the leather with thin iron wire. As the last rivet was hammered in, the sky was already faintly bright, and the morning light streamed through the window into the blacksmith's shop. Hiccup held the tailfin he had crafted, his fingertips gently caressing the smooth leather and cold metal, his eyes full of anticipation. He wondered if the Night Fury would accept this gift. Meanwhile, when Lin woke up, the sky outside the window had just begun to show a hint of fish belly white. He turned his head and saw Mira sleeping soundly, snuggled tightly against his arm, her small head buried in the bedding, her shiny black scales gleaming softly in the dim light. Lin carefully got out of bed, afraid of waking her. Just as he finished dressing, a soft rustle came from behind him. Mira, sensing the emptiness beside her, groggily opened her eyes. Seeing Lin's figure, her eyes immediately lit up, and she let out soft, "Awoo" cries, kicking her short legs and pouncing into Lin's arms. Lin steadily caught her, scratching her chin with his fingertips. Mira looked up at him, her golden eyes bright and watery, full of dependence. Lin's heart stirred. Mira had been cooped up in the wooden house these past few days, it wouldn't do for her to stay bored. Since he was going to the sinkhole with Hiccup today, why not take her along and let her experience the outside world more? He lowered his head and rubbed Mira's head. Today, I'll take you out with me, how about we go for a walk in the back mountains? Mira seemed to understand, excitedly rubbing against him in his arms, letting out joyful, woo-woo, sounds from her throat. After packing his things, Lin carried Mira out, treading very lightly. Vikings were always wary of dragons. If Mira were spotted, it would inevitably cause trouble. He walked quickly along the wall, occasionally peeking around, afraid of encountering early rising tribesmen. Just as he turned the corner, he saw a figure in the direction of the blacksmith's shop. Hiccup was holding something wrapped in cloth, hurrying along, jogging towards the back mountains. From his posture, he was clearly eager to see Toothless. Lin's eyes lit up, and he quickly followed. Mira in his arms also became restless, struggling to jump down. Her short legs pattered beside him, and she didn't forget to look up at him from time to time, afraid of getting lost. Midway, Hiccup turned into his own house. Lin waited behind a tree not far from the house, vaguely hearing Stoik's thunderous snores from inside, presumably still fast asleep. Soon, Hiccup emerged carrying a heavy basket on his back, still holding the cloth-wrapped item in his arms, and quickly headed towards the sinkhole. Lin quickly followed. When he arrived at the edge of the sinkhole, Hiccup was already at the bottom. Lin quietly hid behind a rock at the edge of the pit. Mira mimicked him, her front paws gripping the rock's edge, her small head cautiously peeking down, her golden eyes curiously staring at the bottom of the pit. In the open space at the bottom of the pit, the Night Fury was curled up asleep. Hearing the movement, it immediately raised its head, its green vertical pupils locking onto Hiccup climbing down. It looked at the cloth-wrapped item in Hiccup's arms and the large basket on his back, tilting its head, full of curiosity. Hiccup landed steadily, put down the large basket, first placed the cloth package aside, then untied the basket's ropes and dumped out all the fish inside. Shimmering silver cod, icy salmon with ice shards, and several plump sea fish instantly piled into a small mound. Toothless, look what I brought you to eat. Hiccup smiled and squatted down, offering a cod, then slowly walked towards the Night Fury's tail. There's your favorite cod, and icy salmon, all fresh. The Night Fury sniffed the pile of fish, then suddenly seemed to sense something, abruptly backing away a step, baring its teeth at the fish pile, letting out a low warning growl from its throat, its golden vertical pupils fixed on a wiggling eel among them. Whoa, it's okay, it's okay. Hiccup quickly waved his hands, and after realizing it was an eel, he couldn't help but laugh. I get it, I don't like eels either, actually. Hiccup reached into the fish pile, picked up the eel, and quickly walked to the edge of the pit and threw it out. Thrown far away, you can eat at ease. The Night Fury stared at the direction where the eel disappeared for a few seconds, confirmed the threat was gone, then relaxed and lowered its head to eat the fish heartily. Lin, hiding at the edge of the pit, quietly nudged Mira beside him and whispered, "Look, Toothless doesn't like eels. Do you like them?" Mira, awooed, twice as if she understood, her eyes still fixed on the Night Fury happily eating at the bottom of the pit, her small tail gently wagging. Lin looked at Toothless eating heartily at the bottom of the pit, then lowered his head to look at the eager Mira beside him. Lin gently patted Myra's head, signaling her to follow, then grabbed the vines on the pit wall and carefully climbed down. Mira mimicked him, her small claws gripping the vines tightly, her black figure moving nimbly in the morning light, letting out two low, awoo sounds, as if cheering herself on. With a whoosh, Lin landed steadily on the soft ground at the bottom of the pit. Mira also quickly jumped down, gently shaking her scales upon landing, then immediately went to Lin's feet, curiously surveying her surroundings. This sudden movement made Hiccup and Toothless simultaneously freeze. Hiccup was still holding the tailfin he made for Toothless. He turned and saw that the newcomer was Lin, his eyes instantly widening in surprise. Lin. What are you doing here? Toothless, however, suddenly raised its head, its golden vertical pupils instantly locking onto Lin and Mira, forgetting to swallow the fish in its mouth. When it saw Myra's pitch-black scales, its previously relaxed body abruptly tensed, a low warning growl emanating from its throat, its sharp teeth instantly bared, and all its black scales bristled. It took 2 steps forward, shielding Hiccup, its eyes fiercely staring at Mira, as if it would pounce in the next second. Lin didn't expect Toothless's reaction to be so intense. He instinctively took a step back, reaching out to try and soothe it. Don't be nervous, we mean no harm. But before he could finish speaking, Toothless let out a sharp dragon roar, pressing its front paws low and assuming an attacking stance. Just at this critical moment, Mira suddenly darted forward, blocking Lin. Its small body instantly tensed, and its previously drooping wings suddenly spread open. Although only 1/3 the size of Toothless, its outstretched wings carried an imposing aura that could not be underestimated. The next second, a terrifying pressure suddenly erupted from within Mira. The pressure was like a mountain appearing out of thin air, heavily pressing down on the bottom of the sinkhole. The air instantly solidified, and even the light seemed to dim a few shades. Hiccup felt as if his chest had been crushed by a boulder, his breathing hitched, and his legs uncontrollably went weak. With a thud, he fell to his knees, cold sweat beading on his forehead. He didn't even have the strength to look up, only one thought remaining in his mind: what kind of power is this? Such terrifying oppression. Toothless's reaction was even more intense. Its previously fierce roar abruptly ceased, its body trembled violently, and its golden slit pupils were filled with terror. The earlier hostility instantly vanished. It stumbled back 2 steps, its massive body curled up, its head pressed firmly against the ground, emitting a pleading whimper from its throat, not even daring to glance at Mira. That pressure, to it, was like an absolute suppression from the top of the food chain, preventing it from even conceiving the thought of resistance. Although Lin was not directly targeted by the pressure, he could clearly feel that heart-stopping power. It was like the oppressive calm before a raging storm, or the solemnity before a lightning strike, carrying an innate reverence that made the hairs on his body stand on end. He could feel that this pressure was not directed at anyone, but rather Myra's instinctive release when protecting its master, pure and overbearing, as if declaring, "Do not harm my person." He looked down at the small figure blocking him. Myra's wings were still trembling slightly, clearly indicating that maintaining such pressure was not easy for it. Yet, its golden eyes were full of determination, staring intently at the curled-up Toothless, emitting a low warning growl from its throat, as if admonishing the other party not to be presumptuous again. The bottom of the sinkhole was dead silent, with only Myra's heavy breathing and Toothless's suppressed whimpers. Hiccup knelt on the ground, hands propped on the earth, finally catching his breath. He looked up, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. Lin gently patted Myra's wings, soothing it in a low voice. "It's all right, Mira, it's over. We're not here to fight." Mira seemed to understand his words. The pressure within it gradually receded, and its wings slowly retracted, but it still vigilantly stared at Toothless, its small head slightly raised, as if maintaining a final deterrent. As the pressure dissipated, Hiccup was finally able to stand up. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, and a hint of awe entered his gaze as he looked at Lin. "Lin, what kind of dragon is it?" Lin didn't answer directly, merely squatted down and stroked Myra's head, feeling the warmth beneath its scales. He knew that the pressure Mira had just unleashed was likely a manifestation of its forbidden bloodline, and this power might also be due to Mira having fused with dragon-taming power. Meanwhile, Toothless, curled up to the side, slowly raised its head. The hostility in its gaze towards Mira was gone, replaced only by deep apprehension. After the pressure dissipated, the atmosphere at the bottom of the sinkhole gradually eased. Lin found a flat, open space, gathered dry branches to build a small bonfire, and struck a flint with a crack. The flames quickly rose, their warm glow illuminating the surrounding rocks and making the morning mist feel warm. He pulled out the eel he had specifically brought from his embrace, skewered it onto a slender branch, and stuck it diagonally into the dirt beside the bonfire. He had promised Mira yesterday that he would teach it how to roast fish, and this was a good opportunity to fulfill that promise, and also to see if the little fellow disliked eel. Mira squatted by the fire, its small body almost pressed against the warm stones, its golden eyes fixed on the eel skewered on the branch. The little one's pupils contracted slightly with the flickering flames, its small tail rhythmically swept the ground, and it emitted expectant, woo-woo, sounds from its throat. Occasionally, it couldn't resist reaching out a claw to touch the branch, but Lin gently pressed down on its paw. Don't rush, it tastes best when the skin is golden and the oil seeps out. You'll burn yourself if you touch it now. Mira retracted its claws, seemingly understanding, yet it still wouldn't look away, its nose twitching slightly, clearly captivated by the gradually emanating aroma of the roasting eel. On the other side, while Toothless was engrossed in gnawing on a cod, Hiccup quietly picked up the tail fin made of leather and metal, his footsteps extremely light, and slowly circled behind Toothless. Toothless seemed to sense the familiar scent, merely raising its head to glance at him, showing no resistance. The pressure Mira had unleashed earlier still left it with lingering fear, which in turn reduced its instinctive wariness towards Lin and Hiccup. Hiccup held his breath, carefully fitting the tail fin to Toothless's partially missing tail, wrapping it tightly with pre-softened leather straps. He even tugged it gently to ensure it wouldn't loosen before letting out a sigh of relief. All right, want to try it? Hiccup patted Toothless's back, his voice hiding barely suppressed anticipation. Toothless immediately felt the anomaly on its tail, turning its head in confusion. Its golden slit pupils stared at the unfamiliar leather and metal, and its tail gently swayed, as if testing this new weight. It paused, then suddenly put down the fish in its mouth and slowly stood up, its wings spreading like a black cloak, gleaming with a delicate sheen in the morning light. Even the water droplets on its scales refracted tiny specks of light. It flicked its tail, confirming the tail fin was firmly secured, then suddenly flapped its wings. The powerful airflow instantly swept up fallen leaves and fish scales from the ground. Its body actually lifted off the ground, and Hiccup, hanging from its tail, gasped in surprise, quickly clinging tightly to the metal brace of the tail fin. His feet dangled, but a thrilled smile spread across his face. Lin was gently turning the roasting fish with a branch. Catching sight of this, the corners of his mouth couldn't help but turn up, though he didn't stop what he was doing. Mira also curiously looked up once. Seeing that Lin wasn't paying attention, it immediately lowered its head again, staring at the eel beside the fire, its small nose closer, its breathing even more careful, afraid of missing the moment the fish was perfectly cooked. But after flying for only a short while, Toothless's expression suddenly changed. It glanced down at Hiccup hanging from its tail, a glint of cunning flashing in its golden slit pupils. The previous bewilderment and adaptation vanished, replaced by a longing for freedom. It clearly realized that with Hiccup present, it couldn't truly control its flight, let alone seize the opportunity to escape. It quietly adjusted the angle of its wings, deliberately tilting its body to one side. As Hiccup frantically adjusted his posture, its tail suddenly whipped backward with astonishing force. Ah! Hiccup had not expected Toothless to suddenly attack. His fingers instantly lost their grip, and he was flung out like a kite with a broken string. Hiccup fell heavily into the pool in the center of the sinkhole, splashing a large amount of water. Even the duckweed on the surface was scattered, and several dislodged fish scales floated on the water. Having shaken off Hiccup, Toothless intended to fly away, but after just 2 flaps of its wings, it realized something was wrong. Without Hiccup's traction control over the tail fin, Toothless's body instantly lost balance. Like an uncontrolled black kite, it flapped its wings a few times haphazardly and plunged headfirst into the pool with a plop. The splash was even higher, even reaching the bonfire beside Lin, making the flames sizzle twice. The waves pushed Hiccup towards the shore, right to Lin's feet. Lin reached out and pulled him up, laughing at his disheveled appearance, soaking wet, hair dripping, and bits of waterweed clinging to his face. It seems your design still needs some improvement, at least you need to add a dragon saddle to ensure your safety. Hiccup wiped the water from his face, his hair plastered to his forehead, and scratched his head, an embarrassed smile on his face. Indeed, the balance is still a bit off, and the angle of the tail fin seems wrong too. Just as Hiccup was pondering how to modify the tail fin design, the ground suddenly began to tremble gently. At first, it was a subtle tremor, but it quickly became more pronounced. Sparks from the bonfire showered down, and fine ripples spread across the surface of the pool. Lin's heart tightened. This isn't an ordinary tremor, the ley line energy is restless. If one were to look down at Burke Island from high altitude, they would clearly see the land at the island's edge slowly extending outwards. The original coastline, nourished by energy, was gradually growing new soil and vegetation. At the same time, countless ley line energy erupted from underground in the cave where the original Night Fury Mira was born. 3 meters above the water pool, a deep, dark fissure silently appeared with a crack. The ley line energy on the ground rapidly scoured the fissure, causing it to slowly rotate and expand. In another world, a massive figure was chasing its prey. What is ley line energy? Hiccup clutched the metal brace in the sinkhole, his voice tight. Mira stopped gnawing on its fish, its golden eyes fixed on the direction of the forest, emitting a low growl from its throat. Just then, a long dragon roar came from afar. It was neither the sound of the common dragon flocks on Burke Island, nor did it carry fierce hostility and wariness. Carried by the wind, it made Toothless involuntarily look up in the direction of the roar, its tail tensed. Lin's brows furrowed. An energy anomaly that could cause ley line disturbances and island expansion was definitely not a small matter, and this dragon roar. The trembling of the ground grew increasingly violent, and faint blue halos even seeped out from the rock crevices at the bottom of the sinkhole. That was a sign of the ley line energy reaching its peak restlessness. Lin leaned against the rock wall and stood up. The dragon-taming power within him resonated strongly with the surrounding energy, causing a thin layer of sweat to break out all over his body. The ferocity of this energy was more intense than any time he had felt before. We need to get out and take a look right now. Lin decided immediately, scooping up Mira. Uncontrolled ley line energy could trigger greater danger. Hiccup didn't dare to delay either, quickly calling Toothless to follow. Toothless shook his wet wings, and water droplets on the wing membranes rolled down his scales, splashing onto the dark rock wall. The 2 men and 2 dragons quickly climbed up the rock wall. Just then, everyone froze. As soon as they emerged from the sinkhole entrance, the sight before them made their pupils contract sharply. The changes on Burke Island were far more astonishing than imagined. At the edge of the familiar forest, new soil was rapidly rising, and tender greenweeds were growing wildly along the direction of the energy flow. The distant coastline had extended outwards by dozens of meters, and waves crashed against the newly formed reefs, making a dull sound. The air was filled with a rich energy aura, both warm and carrying a hint of savage ferocity, causing the surrounding plants to grow wildly. The tree trunks became thicker, and the leaves shone bright green. This is unbelievable. Hiccup's eyes widened. He reached out to touch a small sapling that had just sprouted beside him, and his fingertips could clearly feel the energy flowing through the branches and leaves. Lin, however, had no time to admire this strange sight. His attention was drawn by the commotion coming from the northwest. Violent shaking came from the forest there, accompanied by the crack of snapping trees and a few hurried roars. It wasn't a dragon's cry, but more like the bellow of some large wild beast. Come on, let's go see. Lin pulled Hiccup and ran toward the source of the sound. Mira squirmed restlessly in his arms, her golden eyes fixed on that direction, letting out a low warning sound from her throat. Toothless spread his wings, following the 2 at a low altitude. The airflow from his flapping wings made the weeds on the ground sway slightly. The closer they got to the forest edge, the louder the commotion became. The trembling of the ground was increasingly obvious, they could even feel the soil beneath their feet slightly rising and falling, as if something was surging underground. When they peeked out from behind a thick ancient tree, the sight before them made both men gasp simultaneously. They saw 3 herbivorous dragons they had never seen before frantically fleeing across a newly formed open grassland. They were enormous, about 3 meters tall, with streamlined bodies covered in bluish-green scales. They had a pair of curved short horns on their heads, and their limbs were thick and powerful. As they ran, their hooves pounded the ground, making a thump-thump sound. Their eyes were filled with fear, and they let out hurried cries as they ran, clearly being chased by something. Trailing behind them, a gigantic monster was relentlessly giving chase with heavy strides. That monster was extremely massive, standing a full 6 meters tall and reaching an astonishing 16 meters in length. Its entire body was covered in dark brown, rough scales, like it was wearing a thick layer of armor. Its head was broad, its mouth full of sharp fangs, and drool hung from the corners of its mouth. A pair of crimson eyes were locked onto the herbivorous dragons ahead, radiating intense ferocity. Most striking were the pair of huge sail-like structures on its back, which swayed up and down with its running motion. The edges of the sails glowed dark red, seeming to contain terrifying heat. Its hind limbs were like those of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Every step caused the ground to tremble slightly, leaving deep hoof prints behind. Its tail was thick and powerful, tipped with bone spurs, and whistled, whoosh whoosh, as it swung. A monstrous nightmare. Lin's heart sank abruptly as he recognized the monster. This was a highly representative fanged wyvern species from the monster hunter world. It was known for its volatile temper and enormous appetite, primarily preying on herd-dwelling herbivorous dragons. Its combat strength was formidable. An adult monstrous nightmare could easily tear apart ordinary low-ranking monsters. Hiccup's face turned pale from the monstrous nightmare's size. He tightly clutched Lin's arm. What kind of monster is this? It's not even recorded in the dragon manual. Toothless also folded his wings and shrank behind Hiccup, his black vertical pupils filled with terror. Even his previous slyness vanished without a trace. Facing a top predator like the monstrous nightmare, its instincts were reduced only to fear. I know. I read about it in an old book. I thought it was just a story. This is a fanged wyvern species monster, called the forest tyrant. It breathes fire and has extremely strong biting power. We need to be careful. Lin said earnestly to Hiccup. However, Lin's attention wasn't on the monstrous nightmare, but rather fixed on the 3 fleeing herbivorous dragons, his eyes growing brighter. He quickly calculated in his mind, Burke Island previously only had a small amount of sea fish and sheep. Myra's food sources had always been limited, especially high-energy sustenance. These 3 herbivorous dragons looked vital and were herbivorous, herd-dwelling creatures. If he could protect them and ensure their survival, they might be able to breed a population on Burke Island in the future, forming a stable food chain. At that point, both the dragons and the Vikings would have a continuous supply of food. We can't let the monstrous nightmare kill them. Lin made his decision immediately. Although he knew that an adult monstrous nightmare possessed extreme combat power and that he and Mira together might not be a match for it, these 3 herbivorous dragons were too important for the future of Burke Island to simply give up on. Just then, the monstrous nightmare suddenly accelerated, its massive body bursting forth with astonishing speed, instantly closing the distance with the herbivorous dragons. It suddenly opened its massive mouth and lunged at one of the lagging herbivorous dragons. Its sharp fangs gleamed coldly, and it looked about to tear the herbivorous dragon to shreds. Mira, use dragon breath to distract it. Lin acted decisively, pushing Mira forward. Mira understood. Her small body instantly tensed, her wings spread, and after taking a deep breath, a ball of red dragon breath shot out from her mouth, accurately striking the monstrous nightmare's flank. With a loud boom, the dragon breath exploded, and red flames ignited on the monstrous nightmare's scales. However, the monstrous nightmare's scales and hide were simply too thick. The dragon breath only left a small black scar on its body, failing to inflict effective damage. Enraged by the sudden attack, the monstrous nightmare stopped its pursuit, abruptly turned its head, and locked its crimson eyes onto Lin and Myra's direction, letting out a deafening roar. The roar was full of fury, shaking the surrounding trees slightly, and filling the air with a strong aura of malevolence. Oh no, I didn't realize its scale armor defense was so good. Let's run. Hiccup's face went white, and he instinctively wanted to retreat. Lin grabbed him, lowering his voice. Don't run. The monstrous nightmare is faster than us. Running will only make it catch up quicker. He took a deep breath, circulating the dragon taming power within him at full capacity. Our goal isn't to defeat it, but to buy time and let those 3 herbivorous dragons escape. Mira also felt Lin's determination. The forbidden bloodline within her awakened once more, and her scales glowed with a blue-red halo as a terrifying pressure slowly emanated. This pressure was even more powerful than when it erupted in the sinkhole before. Even the monstrous nightmare in the distance paused slightly, a flicker of vigilance in its crimson eyes. But the monstrous nightmare was a top predator after all, and it quickly recovered from its brief caution. It charged fiercely towards Lin and Mira, moving at an astonishing speed. Its massive body carried the momentum of thunder, as if a moving hill was bearing down on them. Scatter! Lin shouted, pulling Hiccup aside and simultaneously giving Mira a look. Mira immediately understood, flapped her wings, flew into the air, and spewed a dragon breath towards the monstrous nightmare's eyes. The monstrous nightmare instinctively turned its head, avoiding the dragon breath's attack, but a charred patch was left on its head. But in that instant, Lin had already rushed to its side, drawing knives from his back and fiercely slashing at its hind leg joint. With a poochie sound, the blades cut through the monstrous nightmare's scales, and blood instantly gushed out. Roar! The monstrous nightmare let out a painful roar, suddenly lifted its hind leg, and stomped down towards Lin. Lin reacted extremely quickly, rolling to avoid the attack. The ground was left with a large crater by the monstrous nightmare's hoof, and shattered rocks flew everywhere. Hiccup also reacted, shouting to Toothless, "Toothless, use your plasma blast to attack its sail." Toothless nodded, suddenly opened his mouth, and a ball of blue energy condensed, shooting towards the monstrous nightmare's dorsal sail. With a boom, the energy ball hit the monstrous nightmare's sail. A gap instantly exploded in the dark red sail, emitting thick smoke. The monstrous nightmare's movements noticeably slowed, clearly indicating that the sail on its back was extremely important to it. But this did not completely repel the monstrous nightmare. It shook its head and charged at Lin again, spewing a scorching flame from its mouth. The flame, carrying intense heat, instantly engulfed the area where Lin stood. "Watch out!" Hiccup shouted. Lin's pupils suddenly contracted. The ball of flame, carrying scorching heatwaves, was rushing towards them. There was no time to think, his body seemed to react first. The dragon-taming power within him surged uncontrollably, forming a translucent energy shield in front of him. How could this be? A hint of bewilderment flashed through his mind, but at this moment, he had no time to ponder. The stinging pain in his palms and the hot wave hitting his face had already dispelled all distracting thoughts. Boom! The moment the flames fiercely struck the shield, Lin felt a tremendous force rebound through his arm. Lin staggered back 2 steps, his chest feeling as if it had been struck by a heavy hammer. The dull pain made him involuntarily bend over, and the sweet, metallic taste rising in his throat was swallowed down hard. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hiccup protecting Toothless as they retreated, and Mira also flew in the air, watching the monstrous nightmare warily. Lin's heart sank to rock bottom. That last attack had already drained most of his strength, yet the monstrous nightmare's flames showed no pause. The scales of an adult dragon were hard enough to resist ordinary attacks, and the flames it spat could also be quite powerful. The 4 of them combined were, at most, just buying time. If this continued, let alone escaping, they might even run out of strength to stand. As Lin caught his breath, he saw it irritably pawing at the ground. On its thick thigh, a black, gaping wound was particularly conspicuous. That was the mark left by Myra's attack. Lin's heart stirred. This was the key to breaking the deadlock. He immediately raised his hand, pointing at the monstrous nightmare's wound, his voice hoarse from hurried breathing but exceptionally firm. "Toothless. Attack its thigh." As soon as he finished speaking, he quickly turned to Mira beside him, his gaze sharp. "Mira, harass it from the air with your dragon breath. Don't let it focus. Be very careful not to get hit by its fireballs." Toothless immediately understood the command. It got up from the ground, its wings slightly spread, and a battle gleam flashed in its eyes. Mira in the air always spat dragon breath at crucial moments. Although its power was insufficient to gravely injure the monstrous nightmare, it successfully attracted its attention. The monstrous nightmare angrily looked up, opened its massive mouth, flames burning within, and leapt up to bite Mira. Mira reacted extremely quickly, her black wings flapping to dodge agilely, the large mouth full of sharp teeth flying past the dragon's wing. The moment the monstrous nightmare was distracted, Toothless seized the opportunity, leaping up from the ground, a dazzling plasma fireball condensing in its mouth. Roar! It let out a low growl, and the fireball flew like a meteor towards the monstrous nightmare's thigh wound. The monstrous nightmare sensed the danger and tried to turn and dodge, but it was too late. The plasma fireball accurately hit its wound. With a loud boom, scales at the wound scattered, and blood instantly gushed out. The monstrous nightmare let out a painful roar, its massive body staggering. It was completely enraged, accumulating power in its mouth again to spew flames, attacking Toothless and Myris dragons. Toothless, with its agile movements, and Myris dragon, twisting and turning in the air, successfully dodged the dragon breath with their combined efforts. But the monstrous nightmare's attacks were too fierce. Subsequent plasma fireballs were either endured by its thick scales or dodged in time. Explosions continuously rang out around them, and the firelight illuminated the night sky. By this time, the three herbivorous dragons had run to the edge of the grassland, burrowing into a dense forest, temporarily out of danger. Lin breathed a sigh of relief and made an immediate decision: retreat. We've bought them enough time. Continuing this fight isn't worth it. Hiccup also knew the situation was unfavorable and quickly nodded. Okay. He called to Toothless, Toothless, quick, take us away. Toothless immediately spread its wings. Hiccup quickly climbed onto its tail and pulled open the tailfin. Lin called Mira to follow, then leapt onto Toothless's back. Toothless fiercely flapped its wings, carrying the two people and one dragon rapidly into the sky, flying towards the sinkhole. Although Myris' wingspan was not as wide as Toothless's, she could keep up closely. Seeing its prey escape, the monstrous nightmare roared angrily at the sky, its voice deafening. It spewed a ball of flame at Toothless in the air, but the flames couldn't reach Toothless at high altitude, only exploding in the air, turning into scattered sparks. The monstrous nightmare's crimson eyes stared fixedly in the direction Toothless flew, pacing restlessly on the ground, a low growl rumbling in its throat. It wasn't until they had flown a long distance that Lin dared to look back, only to see the monstrous nightmare's figure gradually shrink, finally disappearing from sight. He breathed a sigh of relief. The dragon-taming power in his body slowly receded. The battle had exhausted him greatly, and his back was soaked with cold sweat. Mira was also tired, lying in Lin's arms, her golden eyes full of fatigue, her wings trembling slightly. Lin gently stroked her head, comforting her in a low voice. You worked hard, Mira. Hiccup, holding Toothless's tail, gradually landed in an open space near the sinkhole. He jumped down, his legs still a bit wobbly, his face filled with lingering shock. That monster was too terrifying. We were no match for it at all. Lin nodded, his expression grave. That was a monstrous nightmare, a top predator from another dimension. An adult monstrous nightmare's combat power on the ground far exceeds any dragon on Burke Island, unless there's powerful aerial support. He paused, then added, but fortunately, we successfully protected those three herbivorous dragons. As long as they can survive on Burke Island, they will likely breed a population in the future. Thinking of Burke Island having a continuous supply of herbivorous dragons in the future, Lin's eyes lit up again. This was definitely a huge blessing for Burke Island. But Hiccup frowned. What about that monstrous nightmare? It also stayed on Burke Island. It will definitely hunt those herbivorous dragons again in the future, and it might even attack the Viking tribe. Lin's expression also darkened. He knew Hiccup was right, the monstrous nightmare's presence was a huge threat to Burke Island. With their current strength, they couldn't eliminate the monstrous nightmare, only try to avoid it. Lin looked at Hiccup, his tone serious. What we can do now is to improve our strength as quickly as possible. You and Night Fury still need to work hard. Once you can fly, you will be Burke Island's most powerful fighting force. Hiccup nodded, reaching out to stroke Toothless, who was still panting beside him, his eyes filled with determination. Lin clenched his fist and continued, the leyline energy riot has made Burke Island larger and attracted monsters from other dimensions. This is both a crisis and an opportunity. But the villagers still harbor resentment towards dragons. You know, they're like stubborn stones, it won't be easy to make them accept dragons. Hiccup frowned slightly. Lin thought for a moment and said, we must first gain support and influence, then make everyone realize that dragons are not what they imagine. Let everyone see that dragons can protect Burke Island, and that we and dragons can coexist. Then, we'll slowly guide them, there will always be a way. Hiccup gazed into the distance, nodding gently. Hope for the future ignited in both their eyes. When they returned to the village, the panic caused by the earth vein tremors had not completely subsided, and the lingering fear from the shaking wooden houses had many Vikings gripping their axes and discussing nervously. But when someone discovered that large patches of verdant grassland had spread outside the village, and newborn shrubs and tender grass covered the previously barren slopes, making even the air moist and fresh, the panic was instantly replaced by wild joy. We can raise more sheep. Someone shouted, and the Vikings immediately rushed to the edge of the village, touching the fertile new soil, their faces filled with excitement, their previous anxiety long forgotten. Next up, we face the deadly natter dragon. Gobber's rough voice rang out. Deadly natters are fast and tricky. Everyone followed Gobber into the dragon training arena, and the scene before them instantly changed. The previously open space was now partitioned into a dense maze of wooden boards. The passages between the boards varied in width, the narrowest parts only allowed one person to squeeze through sideways, while the widest barely fit two people standing side by side. The iron chain dome overhead was still dense, and sunlight shone through the gaps, casting dappled shadows on the ground. The weapons are still the iron axe and shield. Training is about to begin. Gobber pointed to the equipment stacked in the corner. Remember the deadly natter's characteristics. Its parrot-like hard beak can peck through wood, it has spikes on its head, the spikes on its tail can be shot out like arrows, and the fire it breathes can melt iron. But it can only breathe fire 6 times. Most importantly, it has a blind spot directly in front of it, and it relies on hearing to find people. He paused, his gaze sweeping over everyone. Now, hide. I'll let it in 5 minutes. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone immediately scattered, scrambling to find a hiding spot. Snotlout, relying on his strength, shoved the twins aside and squeezed into the innermost wide passage, leaning his shield against the wooden board and peering out with half his head exposed. Fishlegs hugged his shield and nervously hid in a corner, his hands shaking so much he could barely grip his axe. Roughnut and Toughnut separated, one hid behind a large wooden board, and the other squeezed into a gap between the boards, still exchanging knowing glances. Astrid neatly hid in the shadows at a passage intersection, holding her axe horizontally across her chest, her ear pressed against the wood to listen for movement. Hiccup quietly hid in a corner piled high with discarded firewood, trying to curl himself into a ball and praying not to be discovered. Lin didn't rush to hide. Instead, he quickly ran half a lap around the maze, dragging his fingertips across the surface of the boards. Although the boards were thick, there were obvious gaps at the joints. He noticed a passage on the west side of the maze that was shaped like a Y, where the wooden boards on both sides were relatively thin, and the passage ended in a dead end, making it perfect for an ambush using the terrain. He leaned his shield against the board at the dead end, while he himself pressed against the board on the right, gripping his axe in his left hand, quietly gathering dragon taming power, ready to strike at any moment. 5 minutes quickly passed, and Gobber's roar came from the maze entrance. Are you ready? I'm letting it in. With a clank, the heavy iron gate was pulled open, and an agile figure instantly darted inside. It was the deadly natter. Its entire body was covered in greenish-blue scales, its parrot-like hard beak gleamed with a metallic luster, the spikes on its head spread out like a crown, and the spikes on its tail were arranged in circles, slightly retracted now, swaying gently with its steps. Its eyes were small but shone with a cold, wary light. Its head turned left and right occasionally, clearly relying on its hearing to catch movement. Lin held his breath, even deliberately slowing his heartbeat. He could clearly hear the deadly natter's footsteps, light and rapid, like a gust of wind sweeping across the ground. It didn't rush immediately into the depths of the maze but paused at the entrance, letting out a low gurgle from its throat. Its tail lightly swept the ground, the spikes rubbing against the boards with a sha-sha sound. Suddenly, a crisp sound came from the corner where Fishlegs was hiding. He was too nervous and accidentally dropped his axe. Swoosh! The deadly natter instantly turned its head and shot toward the source of the sound like an arrow. Its speed was astonishing, the airflow in the passage was stirred up, and the wooden boards shook slightly from the impact. Fishlegs turned pale with fright and hastily raised his shield in front of him, but the deadly natter gave him no time to react. It leapt up and viciously pecked the shield with its parrot beak. Crack! A large hole was instantly pecked through the shield, sending wood chips flying. Fishlegs screamed and, terrified out of his wits, turned and ran, his back completely exposed to the deadly natter's attack range. The dragon's tail was already taut like a drawn bowstring, its tail spikes standing erect. The next second, they shot through the air with shoo-shoo-shoo sounds, the cold, gleaming spikes heading straight for Fishleg's back. In the nick of time, Gobber, who was constantly watching from above the dragon training arena, suddenly hurled a spare shield from the edge of the viewing platform. The shield descended with a whistling gust of wind. Bang! 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 3 dull thuds exploded in quick succession as 3 sharp tail spikes struck the center of the shield. Gobber's deep voice came from above. Eliminated. Lack of focus. You won't be so lucky next time. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 Vikings rushed in, hoisting the still shaking Fishlegs between them and quickly carrying him out of the maze. Seeing its attack blocked, the deadly natter flicked its tail in annoyance. The spikes on its head trembled slightly, and a low gurgle rolled out of its throat, clearly indicating extreme irritation at the sudden interference. It turned its head, scanning the maze passages, its ears pressed against the sides of its head, its hearing becoming more alert, seemingly searching for the movement of its next target. Suddenly, it charged toward another spot, the sound of Snotlout shifting inside the passage. Seeing the deadly natter charging, Snotlout didn't hide. Instead, he raised his axe and met it head on. Watch me chop off your tail. But he couldn't keep up with the deadly natter's speed at all. The deadly natter deftly sidestepped the axe, dipped its head, and viciously pecked Snotlout's arm with its hard beak. Ah! Snotlout yelled in pain, dropping his axe on the ground. The deadly natter took the opportunity to whip its tail, striking his abdomen. Snotlout was sent flying, crashing through 2 wooden boards, and finally sat on the ground in defeat, being carried out. Next were the twins. Ruffnut was still hiding behind a wooden board, but seeing the deadly natter charge, she panicked and ran out, appearing directly in front of the dragon. The deadly natter let out a low growl from its throat and opened its mouth to blast a ball of fire. The flame was bright red and astonishingly hot, instantly igniting the nearby wooden boards. The flame accurately struck Ruffnut's iron axe, melting it into liquid iron. Seeing this, Ruffnut ran around in terror, crashed into a wooden board, and passed out. Toughnut tried to rush out of the gap to help but was swept by the deadly natter's tail, crashing directly into a wooden board and passing out. The 2 were quickly carried out of the arena. In just 10 minutes, only Lynn, Hiccup, and Astrid remained. Hiccup was hiding in the firewood pile, too terrified to even breathe loudly. He could clearly hear the deadly natter's footsteps getting closer and closer, and his heart pounded relentlessly. Suddenly, a piece of firewood beside him rolled down, making a thump. Hearing the sound, the deadly natter instantly turned its head, tilting it slightly, looking toward the source of the noise, and charging toward the firewood pile. Hiccup's face went white. He turned and ran, but the passage was narrow, making it impossible to run fast. The deadly natter quickly caught up, its tail slightly raised, the tail spikes ready to launch. Just at this critical moment, a figure suddenly darted out from the side. It was Astrid. She raised her axe and swung it toward the deadly natter's flank. The deadly natter was forced to turn and defend, and Hiccup took the opportunity to slip into another passage. Astrid engaged in a fierce fight with the deadly natter. Her speed was extremely fast, constantly dodging and maneuvering in the passage, swinging her axe with powerful force. The deadly natter tried to breathe fire several times, but she skillfully avoided it, and she blocked the tail spikes with her shield. Good. Astrid, watch its beak. Gobber shouted from outside the arena, his eyes fixed on the person and dragon locked in combat. Astrid's palms, gripping the axe, were soaked with sweat. She knew the deadly natter only had 5 fire blasts left, and she had to hold out until its fire was depleted. Just then, the deadly natter suddenly lunged half a step forward, and an orange-red light glowed in its throat. The first ball of fire shot straight toward Astrid's chest. She immediately ducked into a slide. The flame flew past her scalp, and the wooden board behind her instantly ignited, emitting blue smoke. Before she could stand up, the deadly natter's second ball of fire arrived, this time aimed at her feet. Astrid pushed off the wall for leverage, flipping her body in the air. The fire hit the ground, and the splashing sparks made her pant legs smoke. As soon as she landed, the third ball of fire, wrapped in a heatwave, rushed toward her. This time, the deadly natter deliberately slowed its fire breath, as if anticipating her direction of evasion. Astrid's eyes narrowed. She suddenly turned and charged toward a wooden board, using the narrowness of the passage to slip sideways behind the board. The flame struck the board with a boom, sending wood chips and sparks flying. Only two left. Hold on. Astrid encouraged herself. Just as she was about to raise her axe to counterattack, she didn't realize that the deadly natter had subtly retreated half a step under the cover of the fire blast. After adjusting its posture, it violently whipped its tail, this time not to shoot spikes, but to strike the wooden board fiercely with the base of its tail. The wooden board behind Astrid, already fractured by the fire, instantly splintered and fell toward her. She was forced to dodge forward, placing her directly in the deadly natter's line of sight. The deadly natter seized this opening, and red light glowed in its throat again. Astrid's pupils contracted sharply. It was too late to dodge again, so she subconsciously held her axe horizontally in front of her. Sizzle. The flame accurately hit the axe blade. The high temperature spread instantly, and the iron axe melted at a visible rate, the handle also turning black from the burn. Astrid felt an intense pain in her palm and was forced to let go. The molten iron dripped from her fingertips, burning small pits into the ground. Before she could react, the deadly natter rushed close and violently slammed into her with its hard shoulder. Astrid was thrown back by the immense force, crashing heavily against the wooden board behind her. With a dull thump, the board was dented. She struggled to get up but felt a dull pain in her chest, and her arms were weak. Looking at the deadly natter watching her menacingly nearby, Astrid gritted her teeth, her voice carrying a hint of reluctance. I quit. Now, only Lin and Hiccup remained in the maze. Hiccup was hiding in a narrow passage, trembling all over, afraid to even breathe loudly. The deadly natter seemed to realize that only two people were left. Its pace slowed down, its head turned left and right, and its ears were alertly perked up, carefully capturing any trace of movement. Lin pressed against the wooden board, the dragon-taming power within him quietly circulating. He knew that the deadly natter's hearing was extremely sharp, and any subtle sound would reveal his location. Moreover, its speed was too fast. A direct confrontation would definitely not end well. He had to use the terrain to find an opportunity. Suddenly, a faint noise echoed from the passage where Hiccup was hiding. He was so nervous that the shield and axe in his hands clanked together, making a soft clang. The deadly natter instantly locked onto the direction and rushed over like the wind. Its greenish-blue scales flashed with cold light in the dimness, and the airflow in the passage was churned into chaos by its speed. Its parrot-like hard beak was slightly open, clearly ready to attack at any moment. Hiccup was terrified out of his wits, wildly swinging his axe, but he couldn't even touch the shadow of the deadly natter. He could only retreat frantically in the narrow passage, his back quickly pressing against the wooden planks, leaving him nowhere to go. Now, Lin suddenly rushed out of the Y-shaped passage. All the dragon-taming power in his body converged into his legs, instantly boosting his speed, and he charged toward the deadly natter like an afterimage. The deadly natter sensed the movement behind it, immediately turned around, and opened its mouth to spray a ball of fire. Lin was prepared. He quickly concentrated his dragon-taming power, forming a translucent energy shield in front of him. Boom! The flame violently struck the shield, instantly exploding. The high temperature caused the surrounding wooden planks to start burning. Lin felt a massive force impact him, his chest aching dully. He stumbled back 2 steps, and the shield shattered. That was your last shot, wasn't it? Now it's my turn, Lin said with a smile. Hiccup took the opportunity to run out of the narrow passage and hid near the maze entrance. The deadly natter, enraged by Lin, abandoned Hiccup and turned to charge at Lin. Its speed was extremely fast, churning the airflow in the passage into chaos. Its parrot beak gleamed coldly, clearly intending to peck Lin in one bite. Lin did not retreat. Instead, he charged toward the deadly natter. Just as the two were about to collide, Lin suddenly turned sideways, using the advantage of the passage's width to barely dodge the deadly natter's charge. The deadly natter's beak struck the wooden plank hard, and with a crack, a large hole was pecked into the wood. Lin had just regained his footing and hadn't had time to pull back his axe when the deadly natter changed direction. A scorching growl rolled in its throat, and bright red flames instantly surged out. This time, it didn't aim for Lin's body, but went straight for the iron axe in his hand. How can the deadly natter still breathe fire? Is it because it absorbed ley line energy again? Lin was surprised internally, but it was too late to pull back the axe. The flames instantly wrapped around the axe blade, and the high temperature transmitted through the wooden handle, making his fingers numb. In just a breath, the iron axe, which had been gleaming coldly, began to melt. The axe blade turned into dark red molten iron, dripping down the wooden handle, hitting the ground with a sizzle, and emitting wisps of white smoke. Lin decisively let go, allowing the axe, which was now only half a wooden handle, to fall to the ground, while simultaneously raising his shield quickly with his left hand. The dragon-taming power inside him instantly gathered in his left arm, his muscles bulging slightly, holding the shield firmly in front of him. Seeing the axe melted, a hint of smugness flashed in the deadly natter's eyes. It charged at Lin again, its parrot-like hard beak aiming straight for his chest. Lin didn't dodge. Instead, he took half a step forward into the charge, exerted force with his left arm, and slammed the shield violently into the deadly natter's forehead. Thud. A dull impact sound echoed in the passage. Lin felt a numbing vibration shoot up his arm, but he stood firm, supported by the dragon-taming power. The deadly natter was knocked back 2 steps by the force, staggering. Its hard forehead left a shallow mark on the shield. Clearly, it hadn't expected a human to actively counterattack with a shield. It shook its head, letting out an angry growl from its throat. Its tail lifted slightly, and the tail spines spread out again, but this time, Lin didn't give it a chance to attack. He stared into the deadly natter's eyes, slowly moving his feet, adjusting his position bit by bit, finally standing in the 20-degree fan-shaped area directly in front of the deadly natter. This angle was perfectly positioned within the deadly natter's vision blind spot. Its head shook slightly, and its gaze, which had been locked onto its target, became somewhat confused. Its ears were pressed against the sides of its head, constantly rotating to catch movement, but it couldn't accurately pinpoint Lin's location. The advantage it usually had relying on hearing for hunting was completely lost from this tricky angle. It's here. Lin rejoiced inwardly. Seizing this opening, he once again activated his dragon-taming power to strengthen his legs, quickly closing the distance. He didn't attack rashly. Instead, he raised his shield and struck the deadly natter's flank. The force of this blow was great enough to make the deadly natter feel threatened, causing it to instinctively take half a step back. The deadly natter tried to change direction, hoping to bring Lin back into its sight, but Lin consistently maintained the 20-degree angle difference, following the edge of its blind spot like a shadow. Whenever the deadly natter tried to turn, Lin would lightly strike its flank or leg with the shield, controlling the force just right, enough to make it retreat continuously without completely enraging it. Bang! Another shield bash landed. The deadly natter staggered back to the corner of the passage, its back now pressed against the wooden planks. It irritably whipped its tail, yet still couldn't lock onto a target. It could only spray sporadic sparks into the air, and the growls in its throat became increasingly weak. Lin seized the opportunity, quickened his pace, and landed 3 consecutive shield bashes on the same side of the deadly natter. The impact, amplified by dragon-taming power, wasn't fatal but completely threw the deadly natter off balance, forcing it to retreat toward the dragon prison. The dragon prison gate at the end of the passage was not far away. The opened gate waited only for Lin to force the dragon back inside. The deadly natter seemed to sense the danger, suddenly whipping its tail madly, attempting to blindly attack with its spines. Lin was already prepared. He held the shield tightly in front of him, and simultaneously, using the momentary pause in its frenzy, he exerted force and slammed the shield hard into the deadly natter's chest. Awoo! The deadly natter let out a howl. Its massive body finally lost balance, staggering back a few steps, and retreating right into the range of the dragon prison gate. Lin took the chance to quickly push the gate shut. The heavy iron door closed with a clank, trapping the deadly natter inside. Inside the prison, it slammed around wildly, but could no longer break out. It could only let out angry roars at the prison door, its tail constantly whipping and striking the ground. Only then did Lin sigh in relief, lowering his shield. His back was soaked with sweat, and his left arm was slightly sore from continuously activating the dragon taming power. He leaned against the wooden planks, panting heavily, his gaze fixed on the closed dragon prison gate. An indescribable sense of accomplishment surged in his heart. This time, without relying on weapons, he had forced the powerful deadly natter back into its cage using only tactics and dragon taming power. Well done, Lin. Gobber's voice came from outside the arena, carrying undisguised admiration. But as soon as he finished speaking, his tone became slightly puzzled. You actually found its vision blind spot. That's a weakness even old hunters might not spot. But, I was counting just now, and this deadly natter spat fire at least 7 times. He paused, his gaze sweeping over those present, his tone becoming increasingly serious. Based on past observations, the breath limit for an adult deadly natter is 6 times. Why was there 1 extra time today? Could our previous observations have been wrong? Hiccup, who had just run up to Lin, was also stunned when he heard this. Yeah, I was hiding in the woodpile just now, and I think I saw it spit fire several times too. I thought I miscounted. Lin paused in wiping the sweat from his forehead. He bowed his head in thought for a moment, suddenly recalling the aftershocks of the ley line tremor outside the village before training earlier today. The energy fluctuations in the air were much stronger than usual then. He looked up at Gobber, his tone deliberately speculative. Gobber, could it be related to the previous abnormal tremor? And then some unknown thing appeared and affected it. Abnormal tremor. Gobber was startled, then realized he meant the shaking caused by the ley line in the early morning. Are you saying, after the tremor, some unknown thing appeared and affected it? Lin nodded, turning his gaze toward the dragon prison. Perhaps this deadly natter was also affected, and the flame energy inside its body was abnormally activated, allowing it to break through its breath limit. These words made Gobber thoughtfully stroke his chin. He looked up toward the west side of Burke Island, the area where the ley line tremor had been most noticeable in the early morning. Now that you mention it, that's entirely possible. The anomalies on Burke Island are increasing lately. It seems we'll have to factor in these variables when observing dragon behavior from now on. Astrid walked over, still holding the half-melted wooden handle of the axe. The admiration in her eyes deepened. No wonder I felt the fire was fiercer than usual when I was dodging it just now, it wasn't my imagination. The fact that you could even connect this shows you're much more observant than me. Lin took the wooden handle, tossed it casually onto the ground, and smiled. It was just luck that I happened to notice the energy change. If a weapon is gone, use whatever you can. If the opponent changes, adjust your method immediately. Dealing with dragons shouldn't rely solely on fixed experience. Gobber clapped his hands, pulling everyone's attention back. His tone became serious again. Today's training ends here. When they walked out of the dragon training arena, the afternoon sun was already a bit dazzling. Lin quickly walked toward the wooden house, his mind not only thinking of Mira but also filled with contemplation. Just as he reached the door of the wooden house, he saw Mira lying on the threshold. Her golden eyes immediately lit up when she saw him. She got up and ran over, gently rubbing her head against his pant leg, emitting a low, spoiled growl from her throat. I'm back. Lin squatted down, gently picked up Mira, and felt the warmth beneath her scales. The exhaustion from the previous battle instantly dissipated by more than half. He looked down at the plate beside the bed, half of the jerky was gone. Clearly, Mira had finally succumbed to eating some, but had still saved half for him. Lin smiled and took out fresh fish to feed Mira. The little fellow devoured it ravenously, its golden pupils filled with satisfaction. Lin sat on the edge of the bed, watching Mira finish the last piece of fish, his fingertips gently stroking her faintly glowing scales. Recalling the fierce battle in the dragon training arena earlier, he subconsciously circulated his dragon taming power, intending to relieve the soreness in his arm, but suddenly noticed that the ley line energy in the air was much denser than usual, likely because the aftershocks of the daytime ley line eruption had not yet dissipated. Mira, let's try this together. Lin whispered, placing Mira on his lap and gently placing his hands on her back. He closed his eyes, guiding the dragon taming power within him to circulate slowly, attempting to synchronize with Mira's aura. Before long, Mira seemed to sense something. Her golden pupils gradually closed, and a faint red glow appeared on her scales, resonating with the energy halo around Lin. The moment the two energies intertwined, the surrounding ley line energy converged as if attracted, surging into Lin's body through his fingertips. Unlike the weak sensation of the past, this energy was exceptionally abundant, flowing with a warm, scorching sensation as it slowly traveled through his meridians before integrating into his body. Lin could clearly sense things further away. He could see Vikings walking outside on the stone path. The concentration of dragon-taming power within him quietly increased by a notch, and even the fatigue from the previous battle completely vanished. Mira let out a comfortable purr. The red glow on her scales gradually faded, yet they were brighter than before, and upon closer inspection, she had grown to nearly a meter in length. Lin opened his eyes, looking at Mira, who was lazily rubbing against his palm in his arms, a smile playing on his lips. The ley line eruption brought not only the expansion of Burke Island but also this unexpected cultivation gift. A week passed quietly amidst the roars of the dragon training arena and the tranquility of the wooden hut. Lin's life was as regular as the tides of Burke Island. He would rush to the dragon training arena before dawn, spend the day interacting with various dragons in the training grounds, and return home with fresh fish in the evening. After feeding the clingy Mira, he would cultivate with it, and Mira, due to the abundant energy, had entered its growth phase from its juvenile phase. The aftershocks of the ley line energy lingered, and the rich energy in the air steadily improved his dragon-taming power. His shield blocks had more force, and both his strength and technique were improving. Even Gobber couldn't help but praise him, saying his progress is as fast as if he's being pushed by dragon breath. It's worth mentioning that Stoic returned with the villagers, but only a tattered ship remained. They still hadn't found the dragon's nest this time. Hiccup, on the other hand, embarked on a completely different path of dragon taming. In the past few days of training, he completely abandoned the Vikings' inherent mindset of brute force dragon slaying. With an almost stubborn meticulousness, he figured out the dragon's habits. He discovered that deadly natters hated the smell of eels, so he used eels to drive them back. Knowing that gronkles had no resistance to dragon mint, when a gronkle charged, he would extend dragon mint towards its nose. The gronkle would instantly lie down comfortably upon smelling it. One day, while feeding the night fury fish, he scratched the soft flesh under its chin a few times. With just a light scratch, Toothless would collapse to the ground, purring comfortably. The next day, when training against a deadly natter, he seized the opportunity to lightly scratch the soft flesh under its chin, and the deadly natter likewise collapsed to the ground. After several training sessions, Hiccup always managed to complete tasks in the most effortless way, leaving the other Viking youths wide-eyed. Astrid would always exclaim in surprise, then angrily shout, "I'm even worse than him." Lin observed this and wasn't surprised. He knew Hiccup's talent was never in brute force, but in empathy and observation, qualities that were key to building a connection with dragons. In these past few days, Hiccup spent almost all his time in the blacksmith's shop when he wasn't training. No one knew what he was busy with, only that he came and went daily with piles of leather, metal frames, and ropes, always with an uncontainable excitement on his face. Until the evening of the seventh day, Hiccup suddenly grabbed Lin and mysteriously ran towards the sinkhole. "Lin, come with me, I have something good to show you." Lin followed him into the sinkhole and, from a distance, saw Toothless lying by the previous pond, restlessly wagging its tail, its golden vertical pupils full of anticipation. Only upon getting closer did he realize that Hiccup was holding an exquisite saddle. It was a dragon saddle specially made for Toothless's tail fin, with soft leather wrapped around the edges and a movable foot pedal on one side. The pedal's mechanism was connected to the tail fin with a pull rope, clearly having taken a lot of effort. "This is a dragon saddle?" Lin asked, raising an eyebrow. "That's right." Hiccup excitedly rubbed his hands. "I studied Toothless's tail fin structure. This dragon saddle can both secure the tail fin and control direction with the rope, so it can truly fly." He carefully walked to Toothless's side. Toothless seemed to know this was for itself, meekly lowering its head, allowing Hiccup to fasten the dragon saddle to its back and tail. The moment the frame clicked into place, Toothless wagged its tail, and the tail fin gently swayed with the pulling of the rope, a hint of curiosity flashing in its eyes. "All right, want to try?" Hiccup climbed onto the dragon's saddle, gripping the handles on both sides tightly, his voice filled with unconcealed nervousness and anticipation. Toothless let out a low growl, its wings spread like a black cloak, and it flapped them vigorously. A powerful current of air stirred up fallen leaves from the ground, and its body slowly lifted off. With Hiccup's control, its tail fin gently adjusted its angle, and it actually rose steadily. The sunlight from the top of the sinkhole streamed through the gaps in the vines, shining on Toothless's oily scales, reflecting fragmented light. It worked. We're flying! Hiccup shouted excitedly, pulling the ropes. Toothless agilely circled, dived, and ascended in the air, its movements becoming more and more skilled. The previous tail fin defect was completely compensated for with the help of the dragon saddle. It finally broke free from the shackles of the ground, truly becoming a night fury soaring through the sky. Lin stood on the ground, watching the person and dragon freely moving through the air, a smile involuntarily spreading across his lips. He could feel a special bond surging between Hiccup and Toothless, a trust and tacit agreement, tacit understanding, that transcended control and being controlled. For the next 2 days, Hiccup almost daily took Toothless on test flights. From the initial area near the sinkhole, to later above the forest, and then to the distant coastline, the flying skills of the person and dragon became more and more proficient, even capable of performing thrilling maneuvers like somersaults and rapid dives. On the morning of the 3rd day, Astrid arrived at the open space at the village entrance behind the mountain for training as usual. As she raised her axe, she saw Hiccup in the distance on a small path, carrying a package, hurrying towards the depths of the mountain forest, his expression unusually excited. Astrid felt a pang of doubt. This guy usually drags his feet during training, why is he running into the mountains so early today? Did he find some treasure? Driven by curiosity, Astrid quietly followed him. Using the trees and bushes along the road for cover, she followed Hiccup from a distance, passing through dense woods, crossing babbling streams, and finally arriving at a secluded valley. To her shock, Hiccup actually took out the familiar metal frame from his package, and in the open space in the center of the valley, a black dragon was staring at him. It was the legendary Night Fury. Astrid covered her mouth, almost gasping aloud. She couldn't believe that Hiccup not only hadn't killed the Night Fury, but was also so close to it. She watched as Hiccup skillfully fastened the dragon's saddle onto the Night Fury, then climbed onto it. The person and dragon flapped their wings and soared into the depths of the valley. No, I must tell the tribe. Astrid snapped back to reality and turned to run towards the village. She ran incredibly fast, filled with both shock and anger. In the Vikings' perception, dragons were natural enemies, and Hiccup's actions were nothing short of betraying the tribe. But just as she ran out of the valley, the familiar sound of flapping wings came from behind her. Astrid looked back and saw Hiccup riding Toothless, quickly chasing after her. Astrid, let me explain. Hiccup shouted. Explain. You traitor. You're colluding with dragons. Astrid shouted as she ran, picking up her pace. Toothless's speed far exceeded Astrid's running speed, and it quickly caught up to her. Hiccup pulled the ropes, and Toothless suddenly dived down, gently grasping Astrid's shoulders with its claws, carrying her into the air. Ah! Let go of me! Astrid screamed in fright, clutching Toothless's claws tightly, her body trembling uncontrollably. She looked down at the rapidly passing forest below her, then up at the Night Fury beside her, her heart filled with fear. This was her first time encountering a dragon so closely. The Night Fury's scales were cold and hard, its breath carried a faint smell of sulfur, and its green eyes showed no malice, but rather a hint of disdain. Don't be afraid, he won't hurt you, Hiccup's voice came, full of reassurance. Toothless is very gentle, he won't harm you. Astrid gradually calmed down, realizing that Toothless's movements were very gentle. His claw was only lightly supporting her shoulder, without the slightest sharp sting, a stark contrast to the Viking's description that dragon claws can shred steel. She quietly raised her eyes, meeting Toothless's black vertical pupils. There was no ferocity in those eyes, only childlike curiosity. He even blinked softly, as if showing goodwill toward her. He really doesn't seem malicious, Astrid murmured to herself. Her tense body finally relaxed slightly, and her hands, which had been tightly gripping Toothless's claw, now rested lightly on it. Let go of me. Let me down. Astrid's voice was laced with panic. She looked down. The dense forest resembled a miniature green carpet, and the stream wound through it like a thin silver thread. The dizzying height made her limbs weak, and her hands were desperately gripping Toothless's claw, knuckles white. Hiccup saw her pale, frightened face and quickly shouted, "Astrid, don't move. Listen to me, if you promise not to tell the tribe about Toothless, I'll take you down right now. I swear, I mean no harm." Astrid's body was still shaking. She glanced at the ground again, her heart felt squeezed by an invisible hand, and her breathing became rapid. She knew struggling now was pointless and might cause her to fall. Gritting her teeth, she said in a trembling voice, I promise. I won't tell anyone. Just make him fly lower. Okay. Hold on tight." Hiccup immediately pulled the lead rope. Toothless understood, slowly lowering their altitude while slightly tilting his body, making it easier for Astrid to reach the dragon's saddle. Hiccup reached out and grabbed Astrid's wrist, gently pulling her onto the dragon's saddle behind him. "Sit steady, hold me tight, and don't fall off." Astrid instinctively wrapped her arms tightly around Hiccup's waist, pressing her cheek against his back, clearly feeling his body heat and heartbeat. Toothless flapped his wings again. This time, instead of descending further, he slowly climbed, flying toward the higher sky. "What is he doing? Didn't you say we were going down?" Astrid asked nervously, holding him even tighter. "Don't worry, I'm going to show you something good," Hiccup said with a laugh. He gently patted Toothless's neck. Toothless, a little higher, through the clouds. Toothless let out a low growl, accelerating his wings sharply. Like a black arrow, he shot through the low-altitude mist, flying straight above the clouds. The moment they broke through the clouds, Astrid suddenly held her breath. The scene before her completely overturned her understanding. Above them was a clear blue sky, clean as if it had been washed. Below them were continuous layers of clouds, white like fluffy cotton candy. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the clouds, casting golden spots onto the sea of clouds. The distant sunset was slowly sinking into the clouds, dyeing them orange-red, golden-yellow, and pink-purple, layer upon layer, like God's palette had been spilled. "Wow!" Astrid's gasp of amazement escaped her lips, her earlier fear long replaced by shock. Cautiously, she let go with one hand and reached toward the clouds beside her. As her fingertips skimmed the cloud, she only felt a cool dampness. The cloud flowed through her fingers as if alive, incredibly soft. Hiccup could feel the person behind him relaxing. He smiled and said, "It's beautiful, isn't it? This is the first time I've seen a view like this too." Astrid didn't speak, just gazed raptly at the sunset before her. The light of the setting sun shone on her face, reflecting starlight in her eyes. Her previous anger toward Hiccup and her fear of dragons were washed away by this ultimate beauty. She gently adjusted her posture to see more clearly. Even the hands wrapped around Hiccup's waist transformed from a tight grip into a gentle embrace. Toothless also seemed affected by the beautiful scenery. The rhythm of his wing beats became slow and steady, carrying the two of them as they circled gently above the clouds. The wind blew past their ears, carrying the coolness of the clouds and the warmth of the sunset. Astrid could even hear the gentle purring growl emanating from Toothless's throat, as if he were enjoying this rare view with them. With the boundless ocean and the glorious evening glow, Toothless flapped his wings and flew toward the setting sun, casting the silhouettes of the two riders against the sky full of rosy light, becoming the most beautiful sight above the clouds. The two people and one dragon flew through the air for an unknown amount of time. The coastline of Burke Island had long since vanished behind them. Just as Hiccup was preparing to switch the foot pedal gear to return, Toothless suddenly seemed attracted by something, violently flapping his wings to accelerate, flying toward the darkness overseas. "Toothless, stop. We need to go back," Hiccup called out, but the usually docile Toothless acted as if he hadn't heard, a flicker of confusion crossing his black vertical pupils. Astrid subconsciously gripped the corner of Hiccup's clothes, her voice tight with nervousness. "What's wrong with him?" Hiccup frowned too. He could feel Toothless's body trembling slightly, not from fear, but more like being pulled by some force. "I don't know, he's never done this before. It seems like something is calling him." As soon as he finished speaking, a dense patch of white fog suddenly rose ahead. The milky white mist enveloped them, blocking out even the moonlight. Hiccup immediately pressed down on Astrid's shoulders. "Hold tight, don't move." Just then, Faint, whooshing sounds began to emerge all around them, the sound of wings flapping the air, and from more than one source. Astrid held her breath, clearly hearing the low growls of dragons coming from the mist. There was the familiar screech of a deadly natter and the heavy rumbling snore of a gronkle. How can there be so many dragons? Her voice was trembling slightly. Hiccup also gripped the dragon saddle, looking around warily. Suddenly, an orange light flashed in the mist, followed by a second, and a third. They were dragon eyes. Countless pairs of glowing dragon eyes lit up in the fog, like stars in the night, slowly moving around them. Astrid and Hiccup closed their eyes in fright, pressing themselves tightly against Toothless, but the expected. After about 10 minutes, the fog gradually dispersed, and a black island appeared before them. It was a volcanic island. The crater in the center of the island was billowing thick smoke, and orange-red magma was faintly visible in the opening. What shocked them even more was that the group of dragons emerging from the mist was flying toward the volcanic island. Every dragon had something clutched in its claws. Some carried huge sea fish, some carried fresh venison, and others carried sheep, clearly various kinds of food. Toothless also followed the dragon group toward the volcanic island. Hiccup did not stop him this time. He realized that this might be the reason for Toothless's loss of control, and that this place was the dragon's nest. The dragons circled the side of the volcano for a moment before flying towards a massive cave entrance. The entrance was 30 feet wide, and it was pitch black inside, with only the echoes of the dragons entering audible. Toothless followed without hesitation, and Hiccup and Astrid could only cling to each other, letting Toothless carry them to hide behind a stone pillar. The inside of the cave was not as narrow as they imagined. Instead, it was like a giant karst cave with stalactites hanging from the ceiling. Occasionally, magma seeped from the rock crevices, illuminating the surrounding rock walls. The deeper they went, the higher the temperature, and the stronger the smell of sulfur in the air. Finally, a light appeared ahead. It was the glow from the magma at the bottom of the volcano. Hiccup and Astrid looked down, their hearts instantly leaping to their throats. The bottom of the volcano was a churning pool of magma, with an inscrutable, swirling mist in the center, and dragons were densely packed on the surrounding rock walls, orderly tossing food from their claws into the mist. One gronkle was even more exaggerated. It first burped, then spat out a sea fish from its stomach, which fell into the mist. Astrid covered her mouth, nearly gasping aloud. She finally understood that the dragon's previous attacks on Burke Island were not for destruction at all, but to snatch food. They needed to offer tribute to some entity. Just then, the magma pool suddenly gurgled, and immediately after, the mist in the center of the pool began to swirl, forming a vortex. The dragons instantly fell silent, their breathing becoming shallow. All their gazes were fixed on the center of the vortex, as if waiting for something to appear. Hiccup gripped Astrid's wrist, lowering his voice. "Don't speak, be careful." Astrid nodded, her eyes fixed on the misty vortex. She could feel Toothless's body trembling slightly, not from fear, but from an instinctive reverence. Suddenly, the mist in the center of the vortex exploded, and a massive dark shadow rose from the mist. It was a monster far larger than all the other dragons. Its body was covered in dark red scales, as if solidified from lava, and every joint glowed with the red light of magma. Its head had 6 eyes, and a huge mouth filled with sharp teeth. What is that? Astrid's voice trembled. This was the true source of the dragon's fear. Hiccup's eyes widened. He had heard of such creatures in tribal legends. The Dragon King, ruler of all dragons, nesting in volcanoes and controlling the dragon hordes through fear. The dragon's previous attacks on Burke Island, their snatching of food, were all to pay tribute to it. As soon as the monster, known as the Dragon King, appeared, the temperature throughout the entire cave abruptly rose. The churning in the magma pool intensified, and even the rock walls trembled slightly. Its 6 glowing red eyes swept over the dragons on the rock walls, making no sound, yet causing all dragons to instinctively lower their heads, their bodies tense, not daring to breathe loudly. The gronkle that had just spat out the sea fish seemed unaware of the danger, still licking the mucus from the corners of its mouth. Suddenly, the Dragon King violently opened its massive mouth and swallowed the gronkle whole. Crunch. With a bone-chilling snap, the Dragon King's massive mouth slammed shut. The gronkle's body was instantly devoured, not even a scale remaining. Astrid trembled with fright, tightly closing her eyes. Hiccup also frowned, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected the Dragon King to not only control the dragons but also devour its own subjects, which was even more terrifying. After devouring the Gronkle, the red light in the Dragon King's 6 eyes dimmed a bit, and its massive body slowly sank, returning to the misty vortex, leaving only expanding rings of mist. A brief silence fell over the cave, followed by a faint stir among the dragons. Some nervously flicked their tails, while others whimpered softly, clearly terrified by the recent scene, yet no dragon dared to leave easily. Just then, the misty vortex violently exploded again, and the Dragon King's colossal body rose once more. It didn't immediately attack other dragons but raised its massive head, its nose twitching slightly, as if sniffing for something. Its 6 eyes slowly rotated, finally locking onto the stone pillar where Hiccup and Astrid were hiding. Oh no, it found us. Hiccup's heart sank, and he tightened his grip on the dragon saddle's handle. The Dragon King let out a deafening roar, its voice filled with rage, clearly extremely displeased with these intruders. It violently opened its massive mouth and lunged towards the stone pillar, its sharp teeth glinting with cold light, carrying an earth-shattering momentum. Brother, we have to get out of here immediately. Hiccup shouted at Toothless, pulling hard on the reins. Toothless also felt the deadly threat. A flicker of fear crossed its black vertical pupils, but it didn't hesitate. It violently flapped its wings, its body shooting towards the cave entrance like an arrow from a bowstring. The instant they flew away from the stone pillar, the Dragon King's massive mouth bit down hard on it. Boom. With a tremendous crash, the stone pillar, thick enough for 2 people to embrace, was instantly shattered. Shrapnel flew, splashing into the magma pool and creating huge sparks. The dragons were completely startled by this sudden turn of events. The previously suppressed commotion instantly turned into chaotic flight. All the dragons scrambled to fly towards the cave entrance, some even colliding with each other, just to escape the Dragon King's wrath as quickly as possible. Hiccup and Astrid clung tightly to Toothless, navigating through the cave with difficulty, using the chaotic dragon horde as cover. Behind them, the Dragon King let out roar after angry roar, and shattered rocks and magma flew everywhere. Toothless's flight speed was pushed to its limit, its wings flapping so fast they almost blurred. Several times they narrowly avoided being hit by flying debris, scaring Astrid so much that she squeezed her eyes shut, her hands tightly clutching Hiccup's waist. Finally, amidst the chaos, Toothless burst out of the volcanic cave and flew towards Burke Island. The volcanic island behind them gradually receded, and the Dragon King's roars grew fainter, but Hiccup and Astrid were still shaken, drenched in cold sweat. The journey was silent. By the time Toothless landed at the bottom of the sinkhole again, it was completely dark. Mist shrouded the sky, and distant Burke Island was still silent. Astrid jumped off the dragon saddle, her legs giving way, nearly falling. Fortunately, Hiccup caught her in time. The two stood at the bottom of the sinkhole, panting heavily, the thrilling experience replaying in their minds like a movie. After a long while, Astrid finally recovered, looking at the volcanic island with complex emotions, and murmured, "This makes sense. That volcano is like a giant beehive, those dragons are the worker bees, and the Dragon King is the queen bee. It controls the life and death of all dragons." After she finished speaking, she suddenly turned and ran towards the entrance of the sinkhole, saying as she ran, "Let's go find your dad. Chief Stoik will definitely have a way to deal with it. This is the dragon's nest the Vikings have been searching for hundreds of years. We must seize this opportunity to completely solve the dragon menace." "No. Not yet." Hiccup immediately chased after her, grabbing her arm, his tone urgent. "The tribe has always considered dragons their sworn enemies. If they find out about Toothless, they'll kill him. I can't let him die." Astrid stopped, turning to look at Hiccup, her eyes full of confusion. "Hiccup, snap out of it. We found the dragon's nest. This is what the Vikings have been searching for ever since they started sailing these waters. As long as we defeat the Dragon King, all the dragons will lose control, and we can completely get rid of the dragon threat. But you want to protect this secret. Just to protect your pet dragon. Are you serious?" Hiccup looked at Astrid, his gaze exceptionally firm, saying word by word, "Yes, I am serious. Toothless is not my pet, he is my friend. I saw the dragon's helplessness with my own eyes, they are only attacking the tribe because they are controlled by the Dragon King. I cannot sacrifice Toothless's life just to defeat the Dragon King. Astrid was stunned. She hadn't expected Hiccup to be so resolute. Watching the determination in Hiccup's eyes, the anger in her heart gradually subsided, replaced by a complex emotion. After a long while, she finally sighed and said, "All right, what should we do then? We can't keep hiding this, can we? The Dragon King will find out about our intrusion sooner or later, and when that happens, it might actively attack Burke Island. Just give me one more day." Hiccup looked at Astrid, his tone pleading. "Just one day, and I will definitely figure out a way to both protect Toothless and make the tribe accept the existence of dragons so we can fight the Dragon King together." Astrid was silent for a moment, finally nodding. "Fine, I'll trust you this one last time. But you better hurry and find a solution. I don't want the Dragon King to arrive while we're still dithering here." After speaking, she suddenly raised her hand and punched Hiccup on the shoulder. The force was considerable, making Hiccup stagger. "That punch was payback for kidnapping me." Astrid glared at him, her tone carrying a hint of petulance. Before Hiccup could react, Astrid suddenly stepped forward, grabbed his collar, stood on her tiptoes, and quickly pecked him on the cheek. The touch was soft and warm, making Hiccup freeze instantly. That was for other things. Astrid's cheeks were slightly flushed. After saying this, she turned and ran toward the sinkhole entrance, quickly disappearing into the morning mist. Hiccup stood rooted to the spot, his hand touching the place Astrid had kissed, the warmth of her touch still lingering on his face, his mind completely blank. Just then, Toothless slowly walked up beside him, his golden vertical pupils rolling as he glanced in the direction Astrid had disappeared, then turned back to Hiccup, letting out a low, woo-woo, sound from his throat, as if teasing him. Hiccup snapped back to reality, his face flushing slightly as he looked at Toothless's amused expression. He reached out and pushed its head, saying awkwardly, "What are you looking at?" Just then, a strong wind pressure suddenly swirled above the sinkhole. The dry grass on the ground was blown into the air, and the hair on Hiccup's forehead was plastered against his cheeks. Toothless instantly became alert, his golden vertical pupils suddenly contracting. He fiercely spread his wings halfway, blocking Hiccup, letting out a low warning growl from his throat, his nose twitching rapidly to catch the scent. Hiccup followed suit and looked up, only to see a black figure slowly descending from the air above the sinkhole. It was Mira. But at this moment, she was completely different from usual. She was a full 5 meters long, comparable in size to Toothless, covered entirely in black scales as smooth as obsidian. 4 backward curving horns on her head were newly sharp, their tips keen enough to reflect a faint light. When her wings spread, their flapping created scorching airflow. A row of sharp spines grew from the back of her head all the way to her tail tip, demonstrating full deterrence. Before Hiccup could react, Toothless suddenly folded his wings, stepped forward a couple of paces, sniffed the air with his nose, and the low growl in his throat instantly turned into a gentle, woo-woo, sound. He even lightly wagged his tail, clearly recognizing Mira and completely relaxing. "Hiccup, you're finally back. I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Lin's familiar voice suddenly came from above, carrying a hint of a smile. "I heard the entire conversation you just had with Astrid." Hiccup looked up following the sound, seeing Lin sitting steadily on Myra's back, his hands lightly gripping the leather rope wrapped around Myra's neck. His body swayed slightly with Myra's movements, and his expression was as calm as if this were just a routine ride. Mira felt Lin's gaze, gently lowered her head, and looked at Hiccup with her golden vertical dragon eyes, emitting a low response from her throat, as if greeting him. Mira slowly landed, her strong 4 limbs firmly stepping on the ground. Every step caused the ground to tremble slightly, yet she didn't kick up much dust. Clearly, she was deliberately controlling her strength. When Lin prepared to dismount from Myra's back, Mira naturally bent her knees slightly, raised a foreleg, retracting her sharp claws, and placed it steadily on the ground, creating a natural step for Lin. Lin stepped onto Myra's foreleg and jumped down nimbly. Upon landing, he lightly patted Myra's foreleg, as if thanking her. Seeing Lin dismount, Toothless immediately approached, trying to sniff Lin with his nose, curious why the scent on him was the same as Myra's. But before he could get close, Mira suddenly shifted sideways, pressing close to Lin. Her huge head lifted slightly, her golden dragon eyes fixed firmly on Toothless, her pupils slightly contracting into vertical slits. An invisible aura suddenly spread out. An innate, natural deterrent carrying an undeniable presence. Toothless instantly froze mid-step. His previously relaxed body tensed up again. His golden eyes immediately widened into circles, and he looked at Mira with an innocent expression, his tail quietly drooping to the ground. Finally, he simply rested his chin on the ground, his ears slightly drooped, like a child who had done wrong, even softening his breathing. Hiccup, standing nearby, watched this scene in surprise. Mira had grown stronger, she could now precisely control her aura. All right, Mira, don't scare him. Lin reached out his palm and gently stroked the dragon scales on Mira's neck. Although the black scales were hard, they carried a warm temperature. Tracing the pattern of the scales, he could feel the steady heartbeat underneath. Feeling Lin's comfort, the sharpness in Mira's eyes gradually faded. Mira retracted the released aura, her body slightly relaxing. She squatted down beside Lin's leg, her massive head gently rubbing against Lin's arm, like a large pet seeking comfort, looking completely different from when she was intimidating Toothless moments before. Hiccup looked at Mira, who was squatting beside Lin and was comparable in size to Toothless, his face full of incredible surprise. He reached out and rubbed his eyes, confirming he hadn't missing, then asked Lin, Mira, how did it grow so big? The last time I saw it, it wasn't even half the size of Toothless. How long has it been? And it's almost as big as Toothless. Lin stroked Mira's head, and Mira comfortably rubbed against his palm. He then smiled and explained, I was also surprised at first. Before, Mira and I were training in the wooden house as usual, and then I found that Mira had grown almost a different size every day because it absorbed rich ley line energy. He paused, his fingertips tracing Mira's smooth black scales, and continued, I can feel that energy actively surging towards Mira and me. Mira was glowing with red and blue light all over, and its body grew at a visible speed, slowly reaching its current 5 meters in length. I later realized that ley line energy is actually a natural energy, just like sunlight and rain, and dragons are naturally able to absorb this energy to grow and evolve. Ley line energy. Hiccup frowned, looking confused, is it energy from underground? Yes. Lin nodded, last time, when training with the Inferno Dragon, I unexpectedly awakened the ability to sense ley line energy. I can clearly feel the energy currents surging underground and can guide them into my body to strengthen my dragon taming power. Mira could originally absorb ley line energy passively, and when it was born, my dragon taming power merged with Mira. Later, I accidentally discovered resonance cultivation, turning passive absorption into active absorption, which significantly increased the absorption speed. He looked at Hiccup, his eyes carrying a hint of expectation. Have you ever tried to calm down and feel the ground beneath your feet? Have you noticed a faint warmth, or a sense of flowing energy? Hiccup closed his eyes as instructed, squatted down, placed his palm on the ground, and carefully felt for a moment. But besides the coldness and roughness of the soil, he felt nothing. He opened his eyes, shook his head, and said with a hint of disappointment, no, I didn't feel anything. It's no different from stepping on the ground normally. Don't be discouraged. Lin patted his shoulder, but I can confirm that Toothless must have also absorbed ley line energy. The ley line energy on Burke Island is so rich, and it stays near the sinkhole every day, so it's impossible for it to gain nothing. He looked at Toothless, who was lying on the ground, his eyes analytical. Have you noticed anything unusual about Toothless? Like faster speed, stronger plasma blast power, or any new abilities awakening? Hiccup frowned and thought carefully. In the past few days of test flights and training with Toothless, besides becoming more proficient in flying, there seemed to be no special changes. He shook his head. No, it's pretty much the same as before, it just flies more steadily. I haven't felt any evolution or breakthrough. That's normal. Lin smiled. Toothless is a night fury, a top-tier dragon species itself, with much higher potential than ordinary dragons. The ley line energy required for evolution is naturally greater, and the current energy concentration may only be enough for it to accumulate, not yet reaching the breakthrough threshold. Once it absorbs enough energy, there will definitely be astonishing changes. At this point, Lin's expression became serious, and he changed the subject. Alright, we'll slowly research these things later. Now we need to discuss the dragon's nest and that monster. You mean the Dragon King? And that monster? Hiccup immediately perked up. Lin's fingertips unconsciously tightened, his heart clenching slightly. He lowered his eyelids, concealing the fleeting struggle in his eyes. How could he tell Hiccup that the monstrous nightmare's name, habits, and even its brutal predatory instincts came from memories of another world? The secret of his transmigration was the most untouchable forbidden zone in his heart. Once exposed, he would not only be treated as an anomaly but could also trigger unpredictable panic. He could only bite the bullet and fabricate the lie of ancient records, unconsciously stroking the patterns on Myra's scales, as if seeking support. Yes, not just the Dragon King. Lin shook his head, his tone as natural as possible, but his mind was quickly calculating. Fortunately, he had thought of this excuse before. The tribe indeed had many ancient books destroyed in dragon raids. Using this as an excuse would not arouse suspicion, and if he encountered other monsters from his memories later, he could logically explain why he knew about them. He had to be vague, not revealing any flaws. A long time ago, I saw a record in an ancient book in the tribe. Just by its name, I knew it was an extremely ferocious beast dragon species, living by preying on other dragons and large creatures. Unfortunately, that book was later burned in a dragon raid, and I only remember scattered descriptions. He paused, deliberately slowing his tone to hide his apprehension, while quietly shifting the focus. The news of the monstrous nightmare's disappearance could relieve Hiccup and naturally transition the topic. Just now, on my way to the sinkhole with Mira, I deliberately circled above the forest, trying to find its tracks, but found nothing. I don't know where it's hiding. Lin secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he found the herbivorous dragons again, otherwise, this detail used to appease Hiccup would seem deliberate. He added, but fortunately, I found the 3 herbivorous dragons I protected before. They were hiding in a valley deep in the forest, safe and sound, and also found a patch of fresh grass, looking like they were doing well. Hiccup breathed a sigh of relief. It's good that the herbivorous dragons are fine, otherwise, all our previous efforts would have been in vain. But with the monstrous nightmare and the Dragon King still around, Burke Island's crisis hasn't been resolved. What should we do? When Lin heard Hiccup's question, the stone in his heart finally settled a little. Hiccup didn't press for details about the ancient book, so the lie had passed for now. He raised his hand and patted Hiccup's shoulder, his tone deliberately slow, both to comfort the other party and to convince himself, but there's no need to worry too much. Now Mira and Toothless can both fly proficiently. If we really encounter the monstrous nightmare, we at least have the ability to maneuver and escape, instead of being as passive as before. However, he knew very well that this was only temporary comfort. The dangers in his memory were far more than these, and he would encounter more unknown monsters in the future. The ancient records excuse would have to continue to be used, and he didn't know when the danger would arrive. Lin heard Hiccup's question, first raised his hand and patted his shoulder. His tone slightly softened, but there's no need to worry too much. Now Mira and Toothless can both fly proficiently. If we really encounter the monstrous nightmare, we at least have the ability to maneuver and escape, instead of being as passive as before. His gaze turned to Mira in the corner of the sinkhole, then swept over Toothless beside him, and continued. Myra's strength and dragon breath power have both increased significantly now, and Toothless's plasma blast can also form an effective deterrent. In terms of combat power alone, we no longer need to fear it. It's just that we don't know where the monstrous nightmare is hiding now. Such a ferocious creature can't just disappear into thin air. It might be lurking somewhere near Burke Island, so we need to be extra careful in everything we do next. Hiccup followed Lin's gaze to the 2 dragons, and the anxiety in his heart eased slightly. He recalled the tacit agreement, tacit understanding he had with Toothless during their flights and Myra's current deterrent power. Nodding gently, you're right, with them, we indeed have a lot more confidence. But as long as it doesn't show up, it's like a ticking time bomb, always unsettling. Lin's gaze first fell on Mira, then scanned the surroundings of the sinkhole. After a moment of contemplation, he said, let's leave Mira in the sinkhole for now. It's already so big now, if it hides in the wooden house again, it'll easily be discovered by the tribe. The sinkhole offers strong concealment, and there's water and enough space, making it safer for it to stay here. Mira seemed to understand Lin's words. Its head, which was resting against his arm, slightly lifted, and its golden vertical pupils were full of reluctance. It let out a low, woo-woo, sound in its throat and gently rubbed Lin's palm with its head, as if pleading not to be left behind. Lin reached out and stroked Mira's chin, his tone gentle yet firm. Be good, Mira. We're just temporarily changing places to eat and train. You need to be well behaved here, don't run around, and don't expose yourself casually, understand? Mira stared at Lin for a few seconds, seemingly understanding his intention, then slowly lowered its head and rubbed Lin's hand with its nose, signifying its agreement. It took 2 steps back and obediently squatted in the shadows in the corner of the sinkhole, only revealing a pair of golden eyes, silently watching Lin, looking wronged yet obedient. Hiccup felt a warmth in his heart watching this scene. He hadn't expected Mira to be so intelligent. Lin turned around and looked at Hiccup, his tone becoming serious. Now tell me your thoughts. What plan do you have to both make the tribe accept dragons and deal with the threat of the Dragon King and the monstrous nightmare within one day? Hiccup took a deep breath, his eyes becoming exceptionally firm. He looked up at Lin and said word by word, tomorrow is the tribe's final exam. Your performance should be the best, so you'll be sent to battle the monstrous nightmare. We need to tame that monstrous nightmare. Tame it during the assessment, in front of everyone, not by defeating it with brute force, but by making it submit through trust, or by your own method. He paused, then continued, as long as I can successfully tame the monstrous nightmare, it will prove that dragons are not uncommunicative monsters, and that humans and dragons can coexist. Then, when we tell the tribe about the dragon's nest and the Dragon King, everyone might be willing to believe us and fight the crisis with us. Lin listened, a hint of approval flashing in his eyes. This is indeed a good opportunity. Everyone will be at the final exam. Once successful, the impact will be far greater than explaining it privately. Early the next morning, Burke Island's dragon training arena was already bustling with people. The circular stands were packed with Vikings. The elders sat on the front row stone benches, weapons in hand, ready for any sudden situation. The younger people stood in the back, excitedly waving their fists and loudly discussing today's assessment. Children squeezed by the railings, eyes wide, staring at the empty space in the center of the arena, anticipating a spectacular dragon battle. Lin and Hiccup stood side by side in the center of the arena, the stone slabs beneath their feet still bearing the scratches from yesterday's training. Gobber stood behind them, his wooden prosthetic leg tapping lightly on the stone, making a thump-thump sound, his gaze sharply sweeping across the entire arena. He looked up at the highest part of the stands. Chief Stoic was sitting there, cloaked in a heavy animal hide cape, his brows slightly furrowed, clearly taking today's assessment exceptionally seriously. Beside Stoic sat an old woman with white hair, the eldest witch doctor of the tribe. Her face was covered in wrinkles, and her lips were tightly sealed. No one knew why she couldn't speak anymore, but she usually recorded the daily scores. Stoic and Gobber exchanged glances, then Stoic slowly nodded, signaling that the assessment could begin. Gobber immediately turned to the witch doctor, extended his right hand, and pointed his fingertip towards Hiccup beside him. According to the rules of previous years, the assessment order was usually decided by the witch doctor. The witch doctor's gaze fell upon Hiccup, lingered for a moment, then she slowly shook her head, a hint of worry in her eyes. Gobber was not surprised. He withdrew his hand from Hiccup and instead pointed his wooden prosthetic leg towards Lin. The witch doctor's gaze fell upon Lin. Seeing his upright posture and determined eyes, she remained silent for a moment, then slowly nodded, even lightly patting the stone table beside her, as if showing approval. Upon seeing this, Gobber immediately stepped forward, forcefully raised Lin's right hand high above his head, and shouted to the entire arena, "Today's challenger, Lin." As soon as his words fell, the stands erupted in thunderous cheers. Lin. Lin. Defeat the monstrous nightmare. Let the dragons know the might of us Vikings. The cheers rose and fell, shaking the flags around the arena. Hiccup turned his head, looked at Lin, who was surrounded by cheers, and patted his arm, a smile playing on his lips, his eyes full of encouragement. Brother, go for it. I believe you can do it. Lin turned his head, giving Hiccup a determined look, his voice low but powerful. Don't worry, I'm not just going to defeat it, I'm going to tame it. Today, I will end the misunderstanding between Vikings and dragons and let everyone know that we can actually coexist. Hiccup's heart warmed, and he nodded heavily. He knew that Lin never spoke without certainty. Today's assessment might truly change the fate of Burke Island. Just then, the iron gate on the east side of the arena suddenly creaked open, and a scorching aura instantly filled the air. Accompanied by heavy footsteps, a massive monstrous nightmare, engulfed in flames, rushed into the arena. Its entire body was covered in fire. Its wings spread 3 jong wide, leaving scorched marks on the stone slabs. A low roar rumbled in its throat, its dragon eyes fixed on Lin, clearly full of hostility towards this challenger. The cheers from the stands instantly fell silent. Everyone held their breath, staring intently at the man and the dragon in the center of the arena. A contest of trust and misunderstanding was about to begin. After rushing into the arena, the monstrous nightmare quickly crawled along the stone wall of the dragon training arena. Its claws scraped against the stone wall with a sharp, piercing sound, leaving deep scratches. The flames burning on its body gradually extinguished as it crawled, revealing dark red scales underneath, as if shedding its violent disguise. When it reached the dome at the top of the dragon training arena, it suddenly stopped, its 4 limbs tightly gripping the stone cracks. Its huge head hung down, its dragon eyes fixed on Lin in the center of the arena, motionless, as if observing this unusual challenger. All the Vikings in the arena were stunned, the shouts of, "Kill it!" that were ready to burst from their throats were stuck, and even their breathing became cautious. A moment later, the monstrous nightmare suddenly leapt from the dome, its heavy body crashing onto the stone slabs, making the ground tremble slightly. It didn't pounce on Lin but slowly advanced, step by step, its roar becoming lower, as if probing. Lin's heart was in his throat. He could feel the scorching aura of the monstrous nightmare getting closer, but he didn't retreat. He knew this was the crucial moment for taming. He slowly extended his right hand, palm up, indicating he had no ill intent, but his feet subtly retreated as the monstrous nightmare approached, maintaining a safe distance. What is he doing? Stoic, at the highest point of the stands, suddenly stood up, his heavy cape sweeping across the stone bench, his tone full of anger and incomprehension. Stop the fight immediately. Does he want to be eaten by the dragon? Gabber also stamped his foot anxiously, about to blow the horn to stop the assessment, when he saw Lin's palm gently land on the monstrous nightmare's head. In that instant, time seemed to stand still. The monstrous nightmare's previously tense body suddenly relaxed, its vertical pupils slowly returned to a round shape, the low rumble in its throat completely disappeared, and it even gently rubbed Lin's palm, like a docile giant beast. Oh my god! What is he doing? The stands immediately erupted into chaos. Vikings turned to ask those around them, why isn't he killing this dragon? Questions and exclamations rose and fell, the original cheers completely gone. Stoic's face was livid. He abruptly raised the stone hammer beside him and roared, "Stop! I order you to stop immediately." Before he finished speaking, as he was about to jump down from the stands to stop all this, a deafening roar suddenly came from outside the dragon training arena. The sound was rough, ferocious, and carried a world-shattering momentum. The monstrous nightmare instantly tensed up, its dragon pupils narrowed to pinpricks, and its earlier docility vanished without a trace. It suddenly lunged at Lin, who reacted extremely quickly, dodging sideways, his fingertips brushing past the monstrous nightmare's sharp teeth, breaking out in a cold sweat. Before he could regain his footing, the monstrous nightmare opened its mouth, and a ball of scorching flames shot towards him. Oh no! Lin immediately rushed to the weapon rack at the edge of the arena, grabbed an iron shield and a longsword, and turned to block the flames with the shield. With a boom, the flames hit the shield, instantly burning the iron shield red hot, its edges even beginning to melt. Lin gritted his teeth, fiercely threw the burned shield aside, gripped his longsword, and vigilantly stared at the monstrous nightmare, which had once again fallen into a rage. He looked at the monstrous nightmare, now furious again and full of hostility, and only one thought remained in his mind. There was no time to think about it now. The earlier gentle taming had failed. To tame it, and more importantly, to protect himself and others in the ensuing chaos, he had to subdue it first. At this moment, a dull and rapid thumping sound came from outside the dragon training arena, getting closer and closer, making the ground tremble with each step. Suddenly, with a boom, the stone slabs cracked, and a massive monster rushed in. It was the monstrous nightmare that had been missing for days. It was covered in thick, grayish-green scales, its dorsal fin erect, and its hind legs were thick and powerful. Each step could shatter the stone slabs. The Vikings along the way couldn't dodge in time and were knocked head over heels, some even directly sent flying, crashing heavily against the stone wall, instantly losing consciousness. What is that monster? The Viking warriors were first stunned by the appearance of the monstrous nightmare, then they all raised their weapons, roaring as they charged. Kill it. Protect the tribe. But their weapons only left white marks on the monstrous nightmare's thick scales, unable to cause any damage. The monstrous nightmare disdainfully flicked its tail, sweeping several warriors to the ground, making the scene utterly chaotic. Stoic looked at the scene before him, then turned his gaze to inside the dragon training arena. Lin was holding a longsword, entangled in close combat with the monstrous nightmare, sometimes dodging attacks, sometimes stabbing his sword into the gaps between the monstrous nightmare's scales, but never striking a fatal blow. He gritted his teeth, raised his stone hammer, and charged towards the monstrous nightmare. Everyone, concentrate fire. Attack its eyes. The monstrous nightmare seemed to pay no attention to these little bugs. It scanned the chaotic crowd and suddenly locked onto Hiccup, who was hiding behind a weapon rack. Hiccup was clutching the rack tightly, his face pale, trembling all over. The monstrous nightmare let out a low growl and suddenly charged towards Hiccup, its enormous shadow instantly engulfing him. Ah! Hiccup was scared out of his wits, screaming as he turned to run, but his feet wouldn't obey, stumbling and almost falling to the ground. The monstrous nightmare's footsteps grew closer and closer, its sharp teeth almost touching his back. Crisis was imminent. At the bottom of the sinkhole, it was tranquil. Toothless was curled up on a stone platform, resting, his black scales gleaming dully in the faint light, his breathing even and deep, his long tail gently resting by his side. Suddenly, his drooping ears twitched violently, as if catching some distant yet dangerous signal. The next second, Toothless's eyes snapped open, his golden vertical pupils instantly constricting. His previously lazy demeanor vanished without a trace, replaced by extreme vigilance and urgency. Without the slightest hesitation, he powerfully pushed off the ground with all four limbs, his body shooting towards the sinkhole entrance like an arrow released from a bow. Reaching the edge, he used the momentum of his run, fiercely flapped his wings, the powerful airflow stirring up loose stones on the ground, and his claws desperately gripped the rocks at the edge of the sinkhole, sharp tips embedding into the cracks, forcefully steadying his body. He looked up at the exit above, a low growl rumbling in his throat. His hind legs powerfully pushed against the rock face, and his wings flapped again, his entire body rapidly climbing along the steep pit wall. The black figure flashed through the trees, each scratch of his claws leaving deep marks on the rock face. Moments later, he burst out of the sinkhole and sped towards the village, the sound of his running footsteps echoing faintly on the ground, full of urgency as he rushed towards danger. At the bottom of the sinkhole, the moment Toothless disappeared, Mira slowly opened her eyes in the shadow beneath the tree. Her golden dragon eyes glowed astonishingly in the dim environment, without the slightest confusion of just waking up, only a calm sharpness, as if even when resting, she always maintained awareness of her surroundings. She slowly raised her head, her massive skull turning towards the direction Toothless had disappeared. Her spinal spikes gently trembled, and an invisible pressure quietly permeated the air. Even just lying still, she commanded respect. Thick black scales, like the hardest armor, covered her smoothly muscled body. Four horns gleamed with a cold luster in the faint light, and her long tail swayed gently, every subtle movement exuding an innate power. Moments later, Mira slowly stood up, her broad black wings unfolding like the night sky. Ah! Hiccup's scream pierced the chaotic air. The monstrous nightmare's sharp teeth were mere inches from his back. In this critical moment, a black figure burst through the dragon training arena's wooden gate like lightning, accompanied by a sharp sound of energy charging. Buzz. All the Vikings in the arena felt their eardrums vibrate, and then saw a blue plasma orb the size of a basketball shoot from the black figure's mouth, carrying a dazzling blue light, accurately striking the monstrous nightmare's flank. Boom! A violent explosion rang out, blue energy shockwaves scattered, and the monstrous nightmare's massive body was forcibly knocked back 3 steps, crushing the flagstones beneath its feet, letting out an angry growl. As that, a night fury. The Vikings in the stands instantly erupted into chaos, instinctively shielding their heads, their faces filled with terror and disbelief. A night fury, the most mysterious and dangerous dragon of legend, had actually appeared in Burke Island's dragon training arena. Toothless landed beside Hiccup, his golden vertical pupils fixed on the monstrous nightmare, emitting a low, warning growl from his throat, wings slightly spread, shielding Hiccup behind him. Toothless. Hiccup was both surprised and delighted, his earlier fear instantly vanishing. He grabbed the dragon saddle on Toothless's back, flipped onto it, and skillfully locked his left foot into the stirrup. Great, you came just in time. The monstrous nightmare, hit by the plasma blast, was thoroughly enraged. It let out a sky-piercing roar, spitting out raging flames from its throat, charging fiercely towards Toothless and Hiccup. Hold on tight. Hiccup shouted, quickly shifting the pedal gear. Toothless flapped his wings violently, instantly ascending, narrowly dodging the scorching flames. The flames grazed his tailfin, making the air warp. Oh my gods! Hiccup, he's flying on a night fury. Stoic in the stands widened his eyes, his stone hammer nearly dropping to the ground, his voice filled with shock and bewilderment. He had never imagined that his own son would be so trusting with the legendary Night Fury, even riding it into battle. Inside the dragon training arena, Lin's eyes narrowed at the sight, no longer hesitating. He took advantage of the monstrous nightmare's brief pause between fire breaths, sidestepping the flames, and at the same time, pushed off with his feet, rushing to the monstrous nightmare's side. His longsword accurately stabbed into the gap between the scales of its front limb, that was its weak point. Ow! The monstrous nightmare cried out in pain, its body staggering. Lin then kicked its knee, taking advantage of the moment it fell. Gobber! Help put it back! Lin shouted. Gobber reacted, immediately rushing forward with several Viking warriors, and together they dragged the struggling monstrous nightmare back into its cage. After dealing with the monstrous nightmare, Lin immediately turned and rushed towards the chaotic battlefield in the center of the dragon training arena. Toothless and the monstrous nightmare's battle had already reached a fever pitch. Toothless continuously circled and dived in the air, firing plasma blasts repeatedly, but was still unable to inflict fatal damage on the monstrous nightmare. The monstrous nightmare's thick scales were simply too hard, the blue energy impacts only left shallow scorch marks. Suddenly, the monstrous nightmare seized an opening, sharply raised its head, and spat out a long stream of fire, directly hitting Toothless's tailfin. Rip! The membrane of the tailfin was largely burned away by the flames. Toothless lost balance, let out a painful shriek, and crashed straight to the ground. Hiccup rolled off the dragon saddle. Fortunately, Toothless instinctively protected him, so he wasn't injured. The monstrous nightmare seized the opportunity to charge forward, its massive claw aiming to stomp on Toothless. Toothless struggled to get up, shielding Hiccup with his body, and again fired a plasma blast. However, due to his recent fall, his aim was greatly off, and the plasma fireball grazed past the monstrous nightmare, failing to stop its attack. The monstrous nightmare's claw stomped heavily on Toothless's back. Toothless let out a wail, his body pressed to the ground, his green vertical pupils filled with pain, yet he still fiercely protected Hiccup. He used his last ounce of strength, swinging his tail to strike the monstrous nightmare, but the monstrous nightmare bit his tail and violently flung him away. Toothless crashed heavily against the stone wall and fell unconscious. Toothless. Hiccup's eyes were bloodshot. He wanted to rush over, but was enveloped by the monstrous nightmare's shadow. The monstrous nightmare lowered its head, flames igniting in its throat again, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to the fallen Toothless and Hiccup. Stop. Just then, Stoic violently threw his stone hammer. The hammer, whistling through the air, accurately struck the monstrous nightmare's head. With a dull thud, the monstrous nightmare merely shook its head. Clearly, this blow caused little damage, but it thoroughly enraged it. It turned to look at Stoic, and with a fierce flick of its tail, heavily struck Stoic. After dealing with the monstrous nightmare, he rushed towards the dragon training arena's exit. He was worried about the battle between Toothless and the monstrous nightmare. As soon as his foot stepped out of the wooden gate, and before his vision had fully adjusted to the light outside the arena, he saw a familiar figure arc through the air. Stoic, like a kite with a broken string, flew towards the cliff outside the dragon training arena. Chief. Lin's pupils contracted. Without hesitation, he fully activated the dragon taming power within him, his speed instantly exploding, rushing out like an afterimage. Just as Stoic was about to fall off the cliff, Lin firmly wrapped his arms around his waist. Lin gently placed Stoik on the flat ground by the cliff's edge. Stoik coughed a few times, looked at the villagers wailing in the distance, and then at Hiccup, who was anxiously looking over from the arena, his eyes filled with guilt. Children. I'm sorry. All this time, I've been wrong. Chief, please rest. Leave the rest to me. Lin's tone was firm. He gently pushed Stoik to a safe area, then turned and walked towards the edge of the cliff. Without any hesitation, he slowly leaned back, falling towards the cliff. Lin. Stoik and Hiccup exclaimed simultaneously, their faces filled with confusion and terror. Just as Lin's body was about to plunge into the abyss, a huge black shadow surged up from beneath the cliff. It was Mira. Her wingspan, fully extended, exceeded 10 meters. A shadow fell, black scales glinting with a cold luster in the sunlight, four horns sharp as blades, golden dragon eyes fixed on the monstrous nightmare. The oppressive aura emanating from her silenced the entire battlefield. Lin landed steadily on Mira's back, his hands tightly gripping the leather straps of the dragon's saddle, his gaze as sharp as an eagle's. Mira, it's our turn. Mira let out a deafening roar, her voice filled with anger and deterrence. The monstrous nightmare also raised its head, looking at Mira in the sky, instinctively sensing a threat. It slowly retreated 2 steps, emitting a low growl from its throat, its dorsal fins rising again, creating a standoff with Mira in the air, one in the sky, one on the ground. 2 powerful auras collided, making the surrounding air seem to solidify. A final showdown is about to erupt. Thanks for watching.